The morning air carried a distinct crispness that Jared Simmons had come to associate with early autumn in Montana. At 35, he had developed a ritual of greeting each day with a trail run, a habit that had sustained him through the upheavals of the past decade. This particular Thursday in September promised to be spectacular. The aspen leaves were just beginning their golden transformation, and the sky over Cook City stretched endless and blue above the surrounding peaks of the Absaroka Range. Jared laced his trail runners with practiced efficiency in the small cabin he'd rented for the week. He had taken vacation days from his accounting firm in Bozeman, specifically for this solo retreat, a chance to clear his head and recalibrate before the busy tax preparation season began. The cabin, rustic but comfortable, sat on the eastern edge of town, offering easy access to some of the best trails in the region. He'd discovered this place 3 years ago and returned whenever possible, drawn by the solitude and the wild beauty of the landscape. Perfect running conditions, he murmured to himself, checking his watch. 6:45 a.m. Jared preferred early starts, both to avoid other hikers and to maximize the chance of wildlife sightings. He'd spotted moose, elk, and even a lone wolf during previous runs. The possibility of encountering a bear had always lingered in the back of his mind, but like most experienced backcountry enthusiasts, he maintained a healthy respect rather than fear. He carried bear spray in a holster on his running belt, kept to mark trails and made noise when rounding blind corners, all the recommended precautions. Jared filled his water bottle, slipped his phone into a zippered pocket and stepped outside. The temperature hovered around 45 degrees, cool enough to raise goosebumps on his exposed arms, but perfect for running. He'd warm up quickly once he hit his stride. The cabin's porch creaked beneath his feet as he performed a few quick stretches, his breath forming small clouds in the morning air. His chosen route for today was the Republic Creek Trail, a moderate 7-mile loop that wound through dense pine forest before opening to spectacular mountain views. The trailhead lay just 2 miles from his cabin, an easy warm-up along the road that connected Cook City to the network of trails leading into the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness. As he jogged down the gravel driveway, Jared felt the familiar loosening in his muscles, the pleasant anticipation of a good run in wild country. The road was deserted at this hour. Cook City, a town of just over 100 year-round residents, swelled with tourists during summer and winter, but settled into a peaceful lull during the shoulder seasons. Jared passed darkened windows of closed gift shops and cafes, nodding to an elderly man sweeping the porch of the general store, one of the few businesses open year-round. "Morning," the man called out. "Heading into the hills?" "Yes, sir," Jared replied, slowing his pace momentarily. "Republic Creek today." The man nodded. "Keep your eyes open. Rangers spotted a sow with cubs up that way last week. Thanks for the heads up." "Got my spray?" Jared patted the canister at his hip. "Good man, enjoy the run." The exchange reinforced what Jared already knew. Grizzlies were active this time of year, putting on weight before winter hibernation. The warning didn't deter him. It simply sharpened his awareness. He continued his warm-up jog, making mental adjustments to his plan. He'd be especially vigilant, perhaps make a bit more noise than usual. The possibility of seeing bears from a safe distance even added an element of excitement to the morning. The 2 miles to the trailhead passed quickly. Jared's body settled into a comfortable rhythm, his breathing measured, his mind gradually emptying of the accumulated stress from work. This was why he ran, for the simplicity of movement, the clarity that came with physical exertion in beautiful surroundings. By the time he reached the small gravel parking area marking the trailhead, he felt fully present, attuned to the environment, and ready for the more challenging terrain ahead. A single pickup truck sat in the otherwise empty lot, likely belonging to fishermen who had headed to one of the alpine lakes, accessible from connecting trails. Jared paused at the trailhead sign, reviewing the map though he knew the route well. The information board included the standard warnings about bear country: travel in groups, make noise, carry spray, store food properly. A newer notice announced increased bear activity in the area, confirming what the man in town had mentioned. Jared took a deep breath, stretching his calves one final time before hitting the trail. The path started gently enough, winding through lodgepole pines, whose straight trunks created natural columns in the forest cathedral. Dew still clung to undergrowth in shaded areas, and the earthy scent of decomposing pine needles rose with each footfall. He maintained a steady pace, his feet finding secure purchase on the route-crossed path. At regular intervals, Jared called out, "Hey bear!" loud enough to announce his presence, but not so aggressively as to disturb the morning serenity. The practice felt slightly awkward, as it always did, but he'd internalized the safety protocols years ago. Better to feel foolish than to surprise a bear around a blind corner. The first mile of the trail followed Republic Creek, the water's gentle murmur providing a soundtrack to his run. Occasionally, Jared caught glimpses of trout hovering in deeper pools. The trail gradually steepened as it pulled away from the creek, ascending through denser forest toward a ridgeline that would offer views of the surrounding wilderness. His breathing deepened with the increased effort, but his legs felt strong, responsive. 2 miles in, the forest began to thin, replaced by meadows dotted with late-season wildflowers. The shift in landscape brought greater visibility, but also more exposure to the elements. A light breeze had picked up, cooling the sweat on Jared's face. He paused briefly at a wooden footbridge spanning a small tributary, taking the opportunity to sip water and appreciate the view. The Absaroka Range stretched before him, jagged peaks still holding remnants of last winter's snow despite the September date. It was here, at the edge of the meadow, that Jared first sensed something had changed. Nothing obvious, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a prickling awareness at the base of his neck. The birds had gone quiet. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate. Years of backcountry experience had taught him to trust these moments of intuition, the primitive warning systems humans still carried beneath layers of civilization. He scanned the meadow methodically, looking for movement or shapes that didn't belong. Nothing immediately caught his attention, but the feeling persisted. Jared removed the bear spray from its holster, flipping off the safety cap with his thumb, ready if needed but not yet alarming himself unnecessarily. He decided to continue, but with heightened caution. The trail narrowed as it re-entered the forest on the far side of the meadow, beginning a series of switchbacks up the ridge. Jared slowed his pace, making more deliberate noise now. "Hey bear, coming through." His calls echoed briefly before being swallowed by the dense vegetation. He was midway up the second switchback when he heard it, a distinctive huffing sound from somewhere above him on the trail. Jared froze. The sound came again, followed by a brief rustling in the undergrowth. His heart rate, already elevated from the climb, spiked sharply. He knew that sound. Every hiker in grizzly country knew that sound. "Easy," he whispered to himself, slowly scanning the slope above. The trail curved around a rocky outcropping about 30 yards ahead, obscuring whatever waited beyond. Jared carefully backed up, several steps considering his options. The safest choice would be to retreat entirely, return to the meadow where visibility was better. But sudden movements could trigger a predatory response if the bear was already aware of his presence. He was about to back further down the trail when a small movement caught his eye. From around the outcropping, a grizzly cub ambled onto the trail, its cinnamon-brown fur dappled with sunlight filtering through the canopy. The cub, likely a spring birth and now about 50 pounds, snuffled at something on the path, oblivious to Jared's presence. Its innocuous appearance belied the danger of the situation. Where there was a cub, a protective mother was never far away. Jared's mind raced through bear safety protocols. Never run. Make yourself known, but not threatening. Back away slowly. Most importantly, never position yourself between a mother bear and her cub. He took another cautious step backward, eyes locked on the young bear, while simultaneously trying to determine the location of its mother. The cub raised its head suddenly, catching Jared's scent on the breeze. It made a small questioning sound, more curious than alarmed. Jared's grip tightened on the bear spray canister. He needed to retreat, but the narrow trail offered limited options. The slope dropped steeply on his left, while dense underbrush lined the right side. "Hey bear," he said quietly, hoping to alert the mother to his presence without startling her. "I'm just going to back away now." As if in response, a deep guttural woofing erupted from the forest to his right, much closer than he expected. The sow had been paralleling the trail, invisible in the thick vegetation. The sound froze Jared. In place, primal fear overriding his practiced response plan. A massive form crashed through the underbrush, and suddenly she was there, a full-grown female grizzly, nearly 400 pounds of muscle and maternal fury, her dish-shaped face focused entirely on the perceived threat to her offspring. Time seemed to compress. Jared registered details with supernatural clarity. The bear's shoulder hump, distinctive of grizzlies. Her amber eyes, intelligent and evaluating, the impressive claws, curved tools for digging and defense. She rose briefly on her hind legs, towering over him at nearly 7 feet tall, before dropping back to all fours. Training kicked in. Jared raised his arms to appear larger, spoke in a firm but non-threatening voice. "Easy, bear, easy, I'm not a threat." At the same time, he positioned the bear spray, ready to deploy it if she charged. The recommended distance was 25 feet. The sow was nearly twice that away, still assessing rather than attacking. The cub had retreated to its mother's side, adding another complication. Any movement Jared made now could be interpreted as an approach toward the cub. The sow huffed again, pawing the ground. Her ears flattened against her head, a warning sign Jared recognized from wilderness training seminars. "I'm backing away," he continued, keeping his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. He took another careful step backward, then another. The sow watched, still huffing but not advancing. For a moment, Jared allowed himself to hope the encounter might end peacefully. Many bear encounters did, after all, posturing without physical contact. Then everything changed. A rock dislodged beneath Jared's foot, causing him to momentarily lose balance. The sudden movement triggered the sow's protective instinct. She charged with astonishing speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. Jared had just enough. Time to aim the bear spray, depress the trigger, and pray the pressurized capsaicin would create an effective barrier. A cloud of orange spray erupted from the canister, creating a 6-foot cone between him and the charging bear. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. The sow hesitated, shaking her head as the irritant reached her sensitive nose and eyes. But her momentum and protective instinct carried her through the chemical cloud. Jared felt the impact rather than saw it, a freight train force that knocked him backward and down the steep embankment to the left of the trail. The world spun as he tumbled, instinctively curling to protect his head and vital organs. He came to rest against a fallen log, the wind knocked from his lungs. The bear was on him instantly, her weight immense as she pinned him to the forest floor. Hot breath engulfed his face, carrying the wild, musky scent of predator. Jared went, completely still, implementing the last resort strategy for grizzly attacks: play dead. With his face pressed into the dirt, arms covering his neck, Jared focused on remaining motionless despite the overwhelming urge to struggle. The bear's strength was terrifying. He felt like a rag doll beneath her massive paws. Pain exploded in his side as her teeth closed on his ribs, pressure building until something gave way with an audible crack. Jared bit back a scream, knowing any sound might prolong the attack. The bear released his side only to clamp down on his left shoulder, shaking him with enough force to make his teeth rattle. Each movement sent fresh waves of agony through his tricatasamt. Through the haze of pain, Jared maintained his defensive posture, fighting the instinct to fight back or flee. The attack seemed to last forever, but likely continued for less than a minute. The bear suddenly released him, huffing and circling his prone form. Jared remained absolutely still, eyes closed, barely breathing despite the fire in his lungs. He sensed rather than saw the bear's continued presence, felt her sniff at his body, nudging him once with enough force to roll him slightly. Each touch brought fresh pain, but he maintained the illusion of death, his only chance for survival. After what seemed an eternity, the huffing grew more distant. The bear was backing away, likely returning to her cub. Still, Jared didn't move. Bear attack survivors had reported bears watching from a distance, returning if the victim showed signs of life too soon. He counted his heartbeats, reaching 300 before daring to crack one eye open. The forest had returned to silence around him. No huffing, no movement in the undergrowth. Slowly, painfully, Jared rolled onto his back, gasping as the movement sent spears of agony through his torso. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain, and breathing brought sharp stabs that suggested broken ribs. Something warm and wet soaked the left side of his running shirt. Blood, he realized distantly. Assess the damage, he whispered to himself, falling back on wilderness first aid training. Jared attempted to sit up, managing only partially, before dizziness forced him back down. His left arm responded sluggishly to commands, the shoulder clearly damaged. Careful probing with his right hand confirmed what he already suspected. Multiple puncture wounds from the bear's teeth, at least 2 broken ribs, and a deep laceration across his left hip where claws had raked through his running shorts. Most concerning was the pain in his jaw and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. Tentative exploration with his tongue revealed a loose molar and a split in his lower lip. He reached up gingerly, wincing as his fingers found swelling along his jawline. Fractured, possibly. A dangerous injury in the backcountry, where swelling could potentially compromise his airway. Jared took stock of his situation with growing concern. He lay at the bottom of a steep embankment, perhaps 15 feet below the trail. His bear spray was gone, likely lost during the initial tumble. The pain in his ribs made drawing a full breath difficult, and the blood loss, while not immediately life-threatening, would eventually weaken him significantly. He needed help, and soon. His running belt still circled his waist, and with it his cell phone. Jared retrieved it with shaking fingers, relief washing over him as the screen illuminated. The relief was short-lived. No service bars appeared. He wasn't surprised. Coverage was notoriously spotty in these mountains. Options, he muttered, through gritted teeth. Waiting for another hiker was risky. The Republic Creek Trail wasn't heavily trafficked, especially on weekdays in September. His best chance was to move, to get himself to a location with cell service or back to the trailhead. The thought of standing brought fresh waves of nausea, but Jared forced himself to roll onto his right side, then to his knees. The movement sent cascades of pain through his torso, and he felt warm blood trickling down his side. Bracing against a tree trunk, he slowly pulled himself upright, swaying as vertigo threatened to topple him back to the forest floor. Once vertical, Jared took careful stock of his surroundings. The trail lay above him, requiring a climb up the steep embankment that, in his current condition, seemed nearly impossible. Looking downslope, however, he could see a clearing about 50 yards away that appeared to follow the natural drainage toward Republic Creek. If he could reach the creek, he could follow it downstream to the road crossing, a longer route but potentially easier given his injuries. Jared took a tentative step, nearly collapsing as his left leg threatened to buckle. One step at a time, he encouraged himself, using tree trunks for support as he slowly picked his way downhill. Each movement brought fresh pain, but also a small measure of hope. He was mobile, conscious, oriented. Many bear attack victims never got this far. The descent to the creek took over an hour, though the distance was short. Twice Jared had to stop and rest, leaning against trees as dizziness washed over him. The bleeding from his side had slowed, but his shirt and running shorts were stiff with drying blood. His jaw throbbed relentlessly, and he suspected the fracture was worse than initially thought. Talking or swallowing brought sharp stabs of pain. When Jared finally reached Republic Creek, he sank to his knees on the bank, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. The clear mountain water looked inviting, and his parched throat reminded him he hadn't drunk since before the attack. Using his good arm, he cupped water to his lips, the cold liquid both painful and soothing against his injured jaw. After slaking his immediate thirst, Jared wet his bandana and pressed it against the worst of the puncture wounds on his side. Wincing at the contact, the cold helped numb the pain somewhat and would hopefully reduce swelling. He checked his phone again. Still no service, but the GPS function confirmed his location. He was approximately 3 miles from the road crossing, where the highway passed over Republic Creek. 3 miles, he whispered, the words distorted by his swollen jaw. You can do 3 miles. With renewed determination, Jared pulled himself upright and began following the creek downstream. The terrain here was easier, no trail, but the drainage created a natural path with fewer obstacles. He settled into a pattern: walk until the pain became unbearable, rest, continue. His world narrowed to this simple algorithm, a desperate mathematics of survival. The sun had climbed high overhead by the time Jared heard the distant sound of vehicles, the highway. The noise energized him, providing a concrete target for his flagging strength. He'd been walking for nearly 3 hours, his pace slowed by injury and the need for frequent rest stops. The puncture wounds had begun bleeding again, leaving a trail of crimson droplets on rocks and fallen leaves. As the highway came into view through the trees, Jared felt a surge of relief so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. Civilization, help, safety. He stumbled the final 100 yards, emerging from the forest onto the gravel embankment that sloped up to the roadway. Cars passed intermittently. It wasn't a busy road, but each vehicle represented potential salvation. Summoning his remaining strength, Jared climbed the embankment to make himself visible to passing motorists. The effort left him gasping, bent double from the pain in his ribs. When a blue SUV appeared around the bend, he straightened as much as possible and raised his good arm, waving desperately. The vehicle slowed, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 yards ahead. Jared stumbled toward it as the driver's door opened and a middle-aged man stepped out, followed by a woman from the passenger side. "Oh my God," the woman exclaimed, hand flying to her mouth as she took in Jared's blood-soaked clothing and battered appearance. "Tom, he's hurt badly." "I'm calling 911, the man," Tom said, already pulling out his phone. To Jared, he asked, "What happened to you, buddy? Can you talk?" "Bear," Jared managed, the single word sending daggers through his jaw. "Attack, Republic Creek Trail." The woman approached cautiously, her expression shifting from shock to focused concern. "I'm a nurse," she said, guiding Jared to sit on the SUV's running board. "Try not to move too much. Help is coming." Jared nodded gratefully, allowing himself to relax slightly now that he wasn't alone. Tom spoke rapidly into his phone, relaying their location and the nature of the emergency. The woman, she introduced herself as Diana, gently examined Jared's visible injuries, her touch professional but compassionate. "Puncture wounds to the torso, probable broken ribs, facial trauma with likely mandibular fracture," she reported. To her husband, who relayed the information to the emergency dispatcher. "Responsive and ambulatory but showing signs of shock. Tell them we need ALS response." The world began to blur around the edges as Jared's adrenaline finally ebbed, leaving him vulnerable to the full impact of pain and blood loss. Diana noticed immediately, helping him lie down on a blanket Tom had retrieved from their vehicle. "Stay with us," she urged, elevating his feet. "The ambulance is coming. What's your name?" "Jared," he whispered. "Jared Simmons." "You're doing great, Jared. Just keep your eyes open and focused on me." Time became elastic, stretching and compressing in strange patterns. Jared was vaguely aware of other vehicles stopping, more concerned faces appearing in his narrowing field of vision. Someone placed a jacket under his head. A water bottle appeared at his lips. Through it all, Diana remained beside him, monitoring his pulse, speaking in reassuring tones. The sound of sirens eventually penetrated the fog that had settled over Jared's consciousness. Red and blue lights reflected off nearby trees. New voices, authoritative and urgent, joined the chorus around him. Uniformed paramedics appeared, asking questions he struggled to answer through his damaged jaw. "Bear attack, Republic Creek." "Running." The words came in disconnected fragments as the paramedics established IV access, applied pressure dressings to his wounds, and carefully secured his neck with a cervical collar as a precaution. BP 90 to 60, heart rate 120, oxygen saturation. 94%, one paramedic reported. "Let's get him packaged and moving. County dispatch says the air ambulance is available if we need it." Jared felt himself being transferred to a stretcher, then lifted into the waiting ambulance. Diana appeared one last time at his side. "You're in good hands now, Jared. They're taking you to St. Vincent's in Billings, best trauma center in the region." He managed a slight nod, trying to convey his gratitude with his eyes, since speech had become increasingly difficult. The ambulance doors closed, and the vehicle began moving, sirens wailing as it accelerated toward the highway. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, cutting away Jared's bloodied clothing to better assess his injuries. An oxygen mask covered his face, delivering cool, pure oxygen that helped clear some of the fog from his mind. One paramedic, her name tag read Martinez, addressed him directly as she worked. "Jared, I'm going to give you something for the pain now. It might make you drowsy, but that's normal. We'll be monitoring you closely the whole time." The medication entered his system through the IV line, bringing blessed relief as it spread through his bloodstream. The sharp edges of pain softened, becoming more manageable if not entirely absent. Jared's eyes grew heavy, though he fought to maintain consciousness, to remain present in this strange, terrible adventure. "The hospital has been notified," Martinez continued, checking his vital signs again. "They're preparing the trauma team for your arrival. It's about a 40-minute drive, but we can get the helicopter if your condition changes." Jared processed this information through the pharmaceutical haze. 40 minutes to Billings. The fact that they weren't immediately calling for air transport suggested his condition, while serious, wasn't imminently life-threatening. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. As the ambulance sped along the highway, Jared's thoughts drifted to the bear. Had the attack truly been random chance, Wrong place, wrong time. Or had he somehow contributed through carelessness, through the human arrogance that assumed wilderness could be visited without consequence? The bear had been protecting her cub, following the imperative coded in her DNA through countless generations. There was no malice in her actions, only the pure, frightening logic of survival. These philosophical musings dissolved as the medication took stronger hold. Jared's consciousness began to slip, his awareness of the ambulance's movement and the paramedics' activity growing distant. He didn't fight it this time. The immediate danger had passed. He could rest now, surrender to the current carrying him. Toward help, toward healing. When Jared next became fully aware, the ambulance had stopped, and daylight flooded the interior as the rear doors swung open. New faces appeared, hospital staff in scrubs, moving with the coordinated purpose of a trauma team. He was transferred to a hospital gurney and wheeled rapidly through automatic doors into the bright fluorescence of an emergency department. 35-year-old male, bear attack victim, approximately 4 hours post-incident, Martinez reported to the receiving team. Multiple puncture wounds to left torso with moderate blood loss, suspected rib fractures, mandibular fracture, and left shoulder injury. Vitals stable but trending toward hypertension. He's received 1 liter of normal saline and 4 milligrams of morphine during transport. A physician leaned into Jared's field of vision. A woman with gray-streaked dark hair and eyes that managed to communicate both efficiency and compassion. "Mr. Simmons, I'm Dr. Reyes, trauma surgeon. We're going to take excellent care of you. Can you rate your pain for me on a scale of 1 to 10? Jared held up 7 fingers, speech still too painful to attempt. Dr. Reyes nodded. "Thank you. We'll get you more pain relief shortly. First, we need some images to see exactly what we're dealing with." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Nurses established additional IV access, while others cut away the remainder of Jared's clothing. A technician arrived with a portable X-ray machine. Blood samples were drawn, vital signs continually monitored. Through it all, Dr. Reyes remained nearby, directing the orchestrated chaos with calm authority. "Let's get him to CT after the preliminary." "X-rays," she instructed. "I want to rule out internal bleeding before we sedate him for wound debridement, and call in maxillofacial. That jaw needs their attention." The X-ray technician positioned the machine over Jared's chest. "Deep breath and hold, please," he instructed, then reconsidered. "Or as deep as you can manage, sir." Jared complied as best he could, the movement sending renewed pain through his damaged ribs despite the medication. The machine whirred briefly, then repositioned for additional views of his shoulder and jaw. Each image brought grimaces from the trauma team, visible confirmation of the damage the bear had inflicted. 3 fractured ribs on the left side, Dr. Reyes announced, examining the digital images that appeared on a nearby screen. No obvious pneumothorax, thankfully. The shoulder shows dislocation with possible rotator cuff tear. Mandibular fracture is confirmed. Looks like a bilateral body fracture that will need surgical stabilization. A nurse approached with additional medication, administering it through Jared's IV. "This will help with the pain and reduce inflammation," she explained. "We're going to take you for a CT scan now to check for any internal bleeding or injuries we can't see with X-rays." The gurney began moving again, rolling through corridors to the radiology department. Jared stared at ceiling tiles passing overhead, his mind floating on pain medications, while his body remained acutely aware of every injury. The CT scanner waited like some high-tech altar, its circular opening both promising and intimidating. "Try to remain completely still during the scan," the technician instructed as Jared was transferred to the narrow scanner bed. "It only takes a few minutes." The machine hummed and clicked around him, capturing detailed images of his internal organs and skeletal structures. Jared closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing, shallow to accommodate his broken ribs, but steady. He was alive. He had survived an encounter few people walked away from. Whatever damage had been done could be repaired. After the CT scan, Jared was returned to the emergency department where Dr. Reyes awaited with updated information. "Good news. No significant internal bleeding. Your spleen and liver are intact, and there's no evidence of lung penetration despite the rib fractures. You're going to need surgery for the jaw and probably the shoulder, and will need to thoroughly clean the puncture wounds to prevent infection. But your prognosis is excellent." Relief washed over Jared, though the full impact of her words took time to register through the medication haze. Surgery, recovery, A long road ahead, but a road nonetheless. "We're admitting you to the trauma service," Dr. Reyes continued. "The orthopedic and maxillofacial teams will see you soon. In the meantime, we're giving you antibiotics to prevent infection and medication for pain management. Do you have family we should contact?" Jared nodded carefully, then gestured for something to write with. A nurse provided a small whiteboard and marker, accommodating his inability to speak comfortably. With his right hand, Jared wrote, "Parents. Contacts in phone," followed by his phone password. "We'll take care of that," the nurse assured him, retrieving his belongings from a plastic bag labeled with his name. "Is there anything else you need right now?" Jared shook his head slightly, the movement sending renewed pain through his jaw despite the medication. Exhaustion was catching up with him, the combined result of trauma, blood loss, and the morning's desperate journey to safety. His eyelids grew heavy as staff prepared to transfer him to an inpatient room. "Rest," Dr. Reyes encouraged, patting his uninjured shoulder gently. "Your body needs it to heal. We'll be monitoring you closely." Jared surrendered to sleep as they wheeled him toward the elevator, the events of the morning already taking on the quality of a nightmare, vivid but distant, separated from this new reality of beeping monitors and antiseptic smells. He awoke hours later in a private room, disoriented until memory reasserted itself. Bear, attack, hospital. The sequence returned in fragments, along with awareness of his body, dulled pain, the tightness of bandages, the strange sensation of his immobilized jaw. A nurse noticed his return to consciousness and approached the bedside. "Welcome back, Mr. Simmons. How's your pain level? Blink once for manageable, twice if you need more medication." Jared blinked once. The pain was present but muffled, held at bay by whatever flowed through the IV line connected to his arm. "Good. You have some visitors waiting. The Rangers want to take your statement about the attack. Are you up for that?" "They understand." "If you need to rest." Jared considered, then blinked once again. Better to provide information while the details remained fresh in his mind. The nurse nodded and left, returning moments later with two uniformed Rangers, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, and a younger woman whose expression conveyed both sympathy and professional interest. "Mr. Simmons, I'm Ranger Davis, and this is Ranger Ortiz," the man introduced them, taking a seat beside the bed. "We understand you had an encounter with a grizzly on the Republic Creek Trail this morning. We'd like to get some details if you're able to communicate." The nurse provided the whiteboard again, and Jared took the marker with his good hand. He wrote slowly, the effort more taxing than he expected. "Running, came across cub, mother charged." Ranger Ortiz nodded, making notes. "Where exactly on the trail did this occur?" Jared thought carefully, then wrote, "Second switchback past meadow, about 2 miles from trailhead." "And did you have any warning before encountering the bear?" Ranger Davis asked. Jared added, "Birds quiet, felt something off, then heard huffing." The Sizeu Rangers exchanged glances. "That's consistent with typical grizzly behavior," Davis commented. "Were you carrying bear spray?" Jared nodded, writing, "Used it. Delayed but didn't stop attack." "That's not uncommon," Ortiz explained. "Bear spray is effective in most cases, but when a sow is defending cubs, her protective instinct can override the deterrent effect." She paused before asking, "Can you describe the bear? Approximate size, color, any distinguishing marks?" Jared wrote more details. The bear's cinnamon brown coloration, her impressive size, the spring cub accompanying her. The Rangers listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that Jared answered via the whiteboard. The process was tedious but necessary, both for the official report and for Jared's own processing of the traumatic event. "Based on your description, we believe this is a sow we've been tracking in that area," Davis said after about 20 minutes of questions. "She has 2 cubs, though you only saw 1. She hasn't shown aggressive behavior before, but as you unfortunately experienced, all grizzlies can be dangerous when surprised with their young." "What happens to the bear?" Jared wrote, his concern genuine despite his injuries. Ranger Ortiz answered, "In cases like this, where the bear was exhibiting normal protective behavior in its natural habitat, we typically don't take action against the animal. We'll post additional warnings at the trailhead and may close that section temporarily until the family moves on naturally." This response relieved Jared. He'd never want the bear destroyed for acting according to her nature, for protecting her offspring in territory that was hers long before humans drew lines on maps and carved paths through the wilderness. "We appreciate your perspective on this," Davis said, noting Jared's reaction. "Not every victim is so understanding after an attack. Your account will help us better manage both human and bear safety in the area." The Rangers concluded their interview, promising to check on him during his recovery and offering assistance with any administrative matters that might arise from the incident. As they departed, fatigue descended on Jared again, the effort of communication having drained his limited reserves. The nurse returned, checking his vital signs and adjusting his medication. "Your parents have been notified," she informed him. "They're driving in from Bozeman and should arrive in a couple of hours. The surgical teams will be rounding this evening to discuss procedures scheduled for tomorrow morning." Jared nodded his understanding, grateful for the information yet too exhausted to attempt further communication. As the nurse dimmed the lights and left him to rest, he found himself reflecting on the fragility of human life in wild places. One moment he'd been enjoying a morning run, feeling strong and capable. The next, he'd been at the mercy of forces far more powerful than himself. The realization wasn't entirely negative. There was something humbling, even appropriate, about the reminder of his place in the natural order. With these thoughts drifting through his mind, Jared surrendered once more to sleep, his body beginning the long work of healing, even as his consciousness retreated. He was awakened by gentle pressure on his right hand. Opening his eyes, Jared found his mother beside the bed, her face showing the complicated mix of relief and distress he'd expected. His father stood just behind her, maintaining his characteristic stoicism, though his eyes revealed similar emotions. "Jared," his mother whispered, squeezing his hand. "We came as soon as they called." He squeezed back, unable to offer more with his jaw immobilized. His father stepped forward, placing a steady hand on his uninjured shoulder. "The doctors say you're going to recover fully," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Said it's remarkable you made it to the road with those injuries. You always were stubborn." The attempted humor brought a slight curve to Jared's lips, as close to a smile as his injured jaw would permit. His mother produced the whiteboard the nurses had provided, and he wrote simply, "I'm okay. Thanks for coming." "Of course we came," his mother replied, dabbing at her eyes, "though I've told you for years those solo runs in bear country would get you in trouble." Jared's father cleared his throat. "Marion, not now." To Jared he added, "We've spoken with Dr. Reyes. She explained the surgeries you'll need. We'll be here throughout, staying at a hotel nearby." This news brought both comfort and mild concern. Jared had lived independently for so long that the prospect of parental hovering, however well-intentioned, felt slightly claustrophobic. Still, he was grateful for their presence, for the network of support that had materialized so quickly after his ordeal. A knock at the door announced the arrival of the surgical team. Dr. Reyes, accompanied by 2 additional physicians she introduced as Dr. Patel, the maxillofacial surgeon, and Dr. Winters, the orthopedic specialist. They explained the procedures planned for the following morning: surgical debridement and closure of the puncture wounds, open reduction and internal fixation of his mandibular fracture, and assessment of his shoulder injury with probable rotator cuff repair. "The good news," Dr. Patel explained, "is that we can address the jaw fracture with titanium plates," that recalls while his mother asked about pain management and home care requirements. Jared listened, mentally preparing himself for the long road ahead. When they'd finished, he wrote a single question on the whiteboard: "Will I run again?" The surgeons exchanged glances before Dr. Winters answered, "Yes, absolutely. Not immediately, of course. We're looking at approximately 6 months before you might return to running, and it could be longer before you're back to your previous distances and terrain. But there's no reason. You won't make a full recovery with proper rehabilitation." Relief washed over Jared. 6 months seemed simultaneously an eternity, and a small price to pay given the alternative. He wrote "thank you" on the board, unable to express the full measure of his gratitude for their expertise and honesty. After the surgical team departed, Jared's parents stayed for another hour, his mother arranging personal items she'd brought from his cabin in Cook City, his father discussing practical matters like insurance and leave from work. The hospital had already contacted Jared's employer, and his father had spoken with the HR department to initiate short-term disability benefits. Evening brought a shift change in nursing staff and another round of medications that left Jared drowsy but more comfortable. His parents reluctantly departed for their hotel, promising to return early the next morning before his surgeries. Alone in the dimmed room, Jared found his thoughts returning to the bear, to the wild perfection of her form as she'd risen on hind legs, to the terrible efficiency of her protective rage. There was no hatred in his heart for the animal, no desire for retribution. In her own way, she'd been defending her home, her family, motivations any human could understand. The attack hadn't been personal but primal, a collision between two worlds that usually maintained carefully negotiated boundaries. Tomorrow would bring pain, surgical invasion, the beginning of a long healing process. But Jared felt strangely at peace with the circumstances that had brought him here. The wilderness had always been honest about its terms. Morning arrived with hospital routine, vital signs, medication adjustments, preparatory procedures for surgery. Jared's parents returned as promised, providing quiet support as he was prepped for the operating room. Their concern was palpable, though they tried to mask it with reassurances and practical conversations about his post-hospital care. "We've prepared the guest room at our place," his mother informed him. "You'll stay with us during the initial recovery period." Jared didn't argue, knowing the arrangement made sense given his anticipated limitations. He'd need assistance during those first crucial weeks. And while the thought of returning to his childhood bedroom at 35 wasn't ideal, it was preferable to navigating alone through the challenges ahead. When the transport team arrived to take him to surgery, Jared squeezed his parents' hands in silent farewell. His mother kissed his forehead, whispering, "We'll be right here waiting." His father nodded, the gesture conveying everything words could not. The operating room was brightly lit and cool, a sterile environment of stainless steel and monitoring equipment. The anesthesia team worked efficiently, explaining each step as they prepared to induce unconsciousness. Dr. Reyes stopped by briefly, confirming the surgical plan and offering reassurance. "The procedures should take about 5 hours combined," she explained. "You're in excellent hands with Dr. Patel and Dr. Winters. I'll see you in recovery." The anesthesiologist placed a mask over Jared's face. "Take deep breaths if you can, Mr. Simmons, count backward from 10 for me." Jared complied, managing only to reach 8 before the medication pulled him under, delivering him to the temporary oblivion where his body could be mended without the interference of consciousness. He emerged gradually from anesthesia, awareness returning in fragments, beeping monitors, murmured conversations, the sensation of pressure in his jaw and shoulder. His mouth felt strange, filled with unfamiliar hardware and surgical packing. A nurse noticed his return to consciousness and approached immediately. "Mr. Simmons, the surgery is complete. Everything went well. Are you feeling any pain?" Jared managed a slight affirmative motion, careful not to disturb the complex reconstruction of his jaw. The nurse adjusted his medication, providing quick relief that allowed him to take better stock of his condition. His left arm was immobilized in a sling, secured against his torso. His jaw felt rigid, likely wired shut, though he couldn't confirm without a mirror. Bandages covered his torso where the bear's teeth had punctured skin and muscle. "Your family is waiting to see you once you're transferred to your room," the nurse informed him. "The surgeons will visit later to discuss the procedures and your recovery plan." Transfer to his room occurred about an hour later, once the recovery team was satisfied with his vital signs and alertness. His parents were waiting as promised, his mother rushing to his side while his father conferred briefly with the attending nurse about medication schedules and care protocols. "The doctors said everything went perfectly," his mother told him, carefully avoiding contact with his injuries while squeezing his right hand. "Tut, Dr. Patel already spoke with us about your jaw. You'll have the wires for about 6 weeks, then transition to rubber bands as the fracture heals." Jared nodded slightly, acknowledging the information while conserving his limited energy. The combined effect of anesthesia, pain medication, and surgical trauma left him floating in a strange liminal space, physically present but emotionally distant, observing his situation with detached curiosity. Later that afternoon, the surgical team visited as promised. Dr. Patel examined the jaw reconstruction first, checking alignment and movement of the wiring system that held Jared's mandible in proper position for healing. "The fractures were clean, which made repair relatively straightforward," he explained. "We've placed titanium plates that will remain permanently. They're small and won't set off metal detectors, don't worry. The wiring is temporary, just to ensure proper alignment during initial healing. You'll be on a liquid diet for those 6 weeks, and we'll provide detailed instructions for oral hygiene, which becomes especially important during this period." Dr. Winters followed with an assessment of the shoulder repair. The rotator cuff tear was significant, but repairable. We also addressed the labrum damage from the dislocation. You'll keep the sling for about 4 weeks, with very limited movement allowed initially. Physical therapy will begin with passive motion exercises in about 2 weeks, progressing gradually to active rehabilitation as healing permits. Dr. Reyes completed the rounds with an examination of the puncture wounds. We thoroughly cleaned and debrided all wound sites, removing any foreign material and damaged tissue. The risk of infection is our primary concern now, which is why you'll remain on intravenous antibiotics for several more days. Once discharged, you'll transition to oral antibiotics for an extended period. Each surgeon provided written materials detailing recovery milestones, warning signs to watch for, and follow-up appointment schedules. Jared's parents absorbed this information with determined focus, asking clarifying questions and taking notes. Jared himself remained largely passive, still processing the radical shift in circumstances a single morning had brought to his life. The following days established a new routine of hospital existence: medication schedules, nursing, checks, physical therapy evaluations, and the gradual transition from intravenous to oral pain management. Jared began communicating more effectively, using a combination of the whiteboard, hand gestures, and a text-to-speech app on his phone that his father had downloaded for him. Visitors arrived, colleagues from his accounting firm, friends from Bozeman, even the couple who had found him on the highway. Tom and Diana appeared on his 3rd day post-surgery, bringing a card and flowers that brightened the institutional environment of his hospital room. "We've been following your progress through the nurses," Diana explained. "Everyone's calling. You the bear whisperer. Surviving a grizzly attack is quite the accomplishment around here." Jared typed into his phone app, which spoke for him. "Thanks to you both. Not sure I'd have made it without your help." Tom shook his head. "You'd already done the hard part, getting yourself to the road with those injuries. We just made a phone call." Their visit was brief but meaningful, establishing a connection that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. Before leaving, Diana handed Jared a business card with their contact information. "Keep in touch," she urged. "We'd love to hear how your recovery progresses." Other visitors brought news from the outside world, including updates about the bear encounter itself. Ranger Davis returned with information that trail cameras had captured images of the sow and her 2 cubs moving deeper into the wilderness, away from the area where the attack had occurred. "The trail section remains closed for now," he explained. "We've posted additional warnings throughout the area. Your experience has actually provided valuable data for our bear management protocols." Jared typed, "Glad some good came from it. How long will section be closed?" "At least through the end of the season," Davis replied. "By next spring, the family will likely have established a different territory. Bears generally avoid areas where they've had human encounters unless there's a particularly attractive food source." This information brought a measure of relief. Jared had worried that his encounter might lead to negative consequences for the bear, despite the ranger's initial assurances. Wildlife management often faced public pressure after attacks, regardless of the circumstances. On his 5th day in the hospital, a local news reporter somehow gained access to his room during visiting hours, attempting to interview him about the attack. Jared's father intercepted the unwelcome visitor, firmly but politely escorting her out, while Jared watched with a mixture of amusement and gratitude. The incident prompted hospital security to implement visitor screening for his room, an unexpected consequence of his sudden minor celebrity. "Bear attacks make good copy," his father remarked afterward, "especially when the victim survives to tell the tale." Jared typed, "Not interested in publicity, just want to recover." "We'll run interference," his father promised. "Focus on healing." By the end of the week, Jared's condition had improved sufficiently for discharge planning to begin. The medical team coordinated with his parents to ensure appropriate home care arrangements, including scheduling outpatient physical therapy, arranging follow-up appointments, and providing detailed instructions for wound care and medication management. A hospital social worker visited to discuss potential psychological impacts of the traumatic experience. Many patients who survive life-threatening events experience delayed emotional responses, she explained. This can include anxiety, flashbacks, sleep disturbances, or heightened stress reactions. These are normal responses to abnormal situations. Jared nodded his understanding. Thus far, he'd been too focused on physical recovery to fully process the psychological dimensions of the attack. The social worker provided referrals to trauma counselors in Bozeman, encouraging him to consider therapy as part of his comprehensive recovery plan. "The mind heals on a different timeline than the body," she advised. "Sometimes the emotional impact doesn't surface until physical healing is well underway. Having support in place before that happens can make a significant difference." On the morning of his discharge, 9 days after the bear attack, Jared sat on the edge of his hospital bed while a nurse reviewed final instructions. His mother packed the accumulated cards, flowers, and personal items that had transformed the sterile room into something approaching homey. His father had gone to bring the car around, preparing for the 2-hour drive to Bozeman. Dr. Reyes performed a final examination, expressing satisfaction with his progress. "You've been an exemplary patient, Mr. Simmons. Your physical condition before the attack has certainly contributed to your remarkable recovery thus far. Continue following the specialist instructions, and I anticipate you'll meet or exceed all recovery milestones." Jared typed his thanks, adding, "Still processing. Everything feels surreal sometimes." "That's entirely normal," she assured him. "You've experienced something few people encounter, and even fewer survive. It will take time to integrate this experience into your life narrative. Be patient with yourself." The journey home to Bozeman passed in relative silence, Jared watching. Familiar landscapes scrolled past the car window, while his parents maintained quiet conversation in the front seats. Occasionally his mother would turn to check on him, offering water or pain medication as scheduled. The family home, a comfortable single-story ranch house where Jared had grown up, waited at the end of this journey, both welcoming and strange in his current circumstances. Upon arrival, Jared discovered that his mother had transformed the guest room into a recovery suite, with hospital-grade pillows for elevation, a small refrigerator stocked with protein shakes and liquid nutrition, and a recliner positioned to allow comfortable television viewing. The effort touched him deeply, a tangible expression of parental love that transcended his adult independence. That evening, settled into the recliner, with his jaw aching dully and his shoulder immobilized, Jared found himself truly relaxing, for the first time since the attack. The hospital environment, necessary as it had been, had maintained a constant undercurrent of stress. The unfamiliar surroundings, the regular intrusions for vital signs and medications, the underlying awareness of being in a place of sickness and injury. Here, surrounded by childhood mementos and family photographs, he could begin the psychological unwinding that true healing required. His father brought a laptop and placed it within reach of Jared's good arm. "Thought you might want to check. Emails, connect with friends. Your office has been calling daily for updates." Jared nodded gratefully, opening the computer to find dozens of messages, colleagues extending well wishes, friends offering assistance, even a few interview requests from outdoor magazines and local news outlets. The most surprising email came from a stranger, a man in Wyoming who had survived a similar attack 3 years prior and had heard about Jared's experience through backcountry forums. "Grizzly attacks create an unusual fraternity," the man wrote. "If you ever want to talk with someone who truly understands, I'm available. The physical recovery is challenging, but the mental journey can be even more complex. Either way, know that you're not alone." This message affected Jared more deeply than expected, bringing the first tears since the attack. He hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge the emotional impact, focusing instead on the immediate physical challenges and recovery benchmarks. The simple validation from someone who had walked this path before him opened something within, permission to feel the fear, anger, confusion, and gratitude that had been building beneath his stoic exterior. His mother found him this way, tears streaming silently down his face as he stared at the computer screen. Without asking questions, she sat beside him, her hand finding his uninjured one. They remained that way for several minutes, the quiet understanding between them worth more than words could have conveyed. Later, after his parents had retired, for the night, Jared found himself unable to sleep despite physical exhaustion and medication. His mind replayed moments from the attack, the cub's curious expression, the sow's thunderous charge, the terrible pressure of her jaws. In the darkness of the guest room, these images seemed more immediate, more threatening than they had in the hospital's fluorescent-lit environment. He reached for his phone, opening a new note file. With one hand he began typing, Not a coherent narrative, but fragments of memory and emotion, a digital journal of his experience. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but somehow necessary. By documenting these moments, he began transforming them from active threats to contained memories, from ongoing trauma to past event. Dawn found him still awake, the note file now extensive. Exhaustion had finally overtaken anxiety, leaving Jared in a state of calm acceptance. He wasn't over the attack, wouldn't be for some time, perhaps ever completely, but he had begun the process of integrating it into his life story rather than allowing it to define him entirely. The following weeks established new routines centered around recovery. Mornings began with medication and liquid nutrition, followed by gentle exercises for his uninjured limbs to maintain general conditioning. Physical therapy appointments 3 times weekly introduced gradually increasing movement for his shoulder, painful but necessary work that marked progress in small, measurable increments. Weekly visits to Dr. Patel monitored his jaw healing, with minor adjustments to the wiring system as swelling subsided and bone knitting progressed. Friends visited regularly, bringing distractions in the form of movies, books, and company. Jared's boss arranged for him to handle limited remote work when he felt able, providing intellectual engagement without pressure to return before he was ready. His parents maintained their supportive presence while respecting his independence, available when needed, but allowing him space to navigate his recovery journey. 4 weeks after the attack, Jared attended his first session with Dr. Chen, a trauma therapist in Bozeman who specialized in wilderness-related incidents. The session was challenging. Speaking remained difficult with his wired jaw, necessitating continued use of the text-to-speech app, but valuable. Dr. Chen employed a combination of cognitive behavioral techniques and exposure therapy, helping Jared process the attack without becoming overwhelmed by the associated emotions. Many survivors experience a complicated relationship with wilderness afterward, Dr. Chen explained. Some develop specific phobias about bears or forests. Others feel compelled to return to the location as a way of reclaiming control. There's no single right response. Jared typed, "Not sure how I'll feel about trails yet. Miss running but also have flashes of fear thinking about it. That's entirely normal," she assured him. "We'll work together to process those feelings, allowing you to make choices based on desire rather than avoidance or compulsion when you're physically ready to consider returning to those activities." These therapy sessions became another cornerstone of his recovery, addressing dimensions of healing that physical rehabilitation couldn't reach. Jared found himself looking forward to the weekly appointments, valuing the opportunity to explore the psychological impact of his experience with professional guidance. 6 weeks post-attack brought a significant milestone: the removal of the jaw wiring. Dr. Patel performed the procedure in his office, carefully snipping and removing the wires that had held Jared's mandible immobile during the critical healing phase. Freedom from this constraint felt monumental, though Jared discovered that actual jaw movement remained limited and painful. "The muscles and soft tissues need to be gradually reconditioned," Dr. Patel explained, demonstrating gentle exercises to increase mobility. "We'll transition to rubber bands for nighttime use to maintain alignment, but during the day, you'll begin reintroducing normal jaw function." The ability to speak again, however haltingly, represented a profound shift in Jared's recovery journey. Simple pleasures, thanking his parents directly rather than through typed messages, ordering his own coffee at therapy appointments, humming along with music, took on unexpected significance. His first solid meal, though limited to soft foods, became a celebration marked by his mother's homemade mashed potatoes and the richest chocolate pudding he'd ever tasted. That same week brought the transition from shoulder immobilization to more active rehabilitation. Dr. Winters removed the restrictive sling, replacing it with a less constraining brace that allowed gradually increasing movement while protecting the surgical repairs. Physical therapy intensified, introducing resistance exercises and expanded range of motion work that left Jared exhausted but satisfied with tangible progress. "You're ahead of schedule," his physical therapist remarked during a particularly challenging session. "The pre-injury conditioning is paying dividends now." Jared managed a careful smile, still conscious of his healing jaw. "Motivation helps too. Ready to get back to normal life?" The therapist nodded, understanding. "Just remember that recovery isn't linear. You'll have setbacks alongside the progress. The key is consistency and patience. This advice proved prophetic. 2 days later, Jared woke to find his shoulder unusually painful and swollen, the site of one surgical incision, showing signs of delayed infection. An urgent visit to Dr. Winters resulted in wound culture, antibiotic adjustment, and temporarily scaled back physical therapy, a frustrating but necessary pause in his forward momentum. Secondary infections aren't uncommon with wild animal bite wounds, Dr. Winters explained. The bacteria involved can sometimes lie dormant despite our best preventative efforts. We've caught this early, so I don't anticipate serious complications, but it will require attention and possibly delay some recovery benchmarks. Jared accepted this setback with outward equanimity, though inwardly he chafed at the interruption to his carefully planned recovery timeline. The incident served as a humbling reminder of his body's complexity and the unpredictable nature of healing from traumatic injury. As his physical recovery progressed, Jared's digital journal expanded to include reflections beyond the attack itself, thoughts about his relationship with wilderness, considerations of mortality and vulnerability, appreciation for the support systems he'd previously taken for granted. Writing became therapeutic, a way of processing the ongoing evolution of his perspective. Dr. Chen encouraged this practice, noting that traumatic experiences often prompted existential reassessment. Many survivors report that after the initial recovery period, they begin to recognize ways the experience has changed their outlook, she explained during one session. Some of these changes can be challenging, but others represent growth and deepened appreciation for life. Jared had indeed noticed such shifts. Simple pleasures, a hot shower, conversation with friends, his mother's cooking, carried heightened significance. He found himself more present in daily interactions, less concerned with long-term planning or career advancement that had previously dominated his thinking. Whether these changes would prove temporary or permanent remained unclear, but he recognized their value in his current circumstances. 8 weeks after the attack, Jared felt ready to address practical matters that had been deferred during intensive recovery. With his parents' help, he returned to his apartment in Bozeman for the first time since the incident. The space felt simultaneously familiar and strange, a life interrupted and now cautiously resumed. Mail had accumulated despite his father's regular collection of important items. Plants had withered despite a neighbor's intermittent watering. Dust had settled on surfaces, creating a thin film that symbolized absence. "We can help clean up," his mother offered, already reaching for supplies under the kitchen sink. Jared shook his head. "I need to do this myself, part of reclaiming my space." His parents respected this decision, helping only with tasks that remained physically challenging for him, changing bed linens, moving furniture for vacuuming. The process of restoring order to his apartment became symbolic, a tangible representation of his gradual return to independence. By day's end, the space felt like home again, though Jared agreed to continue staying with his parents until his physical therapy progressed further. That evening, sitting at his own desk for the first time in 2 months, Jared opened his laptop and searched for information about the Republic Creek Trail. He found recent updates from the Forest Service, noting that the trail section where his attack occurred remained closed to hikers, with additional warning signs installed throughout the area. Further research revealed ongoing discussions in outdoor forums about his encounter, with many using it as a cautionary tale about proper bear country protocols. More surprisingly, he discovered that a local outdoor equipment shop had established a Bear-Aware Scholarship Fund in his name, providing wilderness safety training for underprivileged youth. The initiative had gained traction regionally, with several companies contributing to expand the program's reach. This unexpected positive outcome from his traumatic experience moved Jared deeply, prompting him to contact the shop owner to express gratitude and offer his eventual participation when recovery permitted. Another significant development arrived in his email, a message from his company's HR department confirming approval for his gradual return to work schedule, beginning with remote part-time hours and progressing to in-office presence as his recovery allowed. The structured reintegration plan provided both financial security and a framework for professional re-engagement that respected his ongoing medical needs. 3 months post-attack, Jared's physical recovery had progressed significantly. His Jaw function had returned to approximately 80% of normal, with continued improvement expected. His shoulder permitted most daily activities with modifications, though strength remained diminished compared to pre-injury levels. The puncture wounds had healed completely, leaving raised scars that would likely fade somewhat with time, but remain permanent reminders of his encounter. These visible markers of the attack occasionally drew attention in public settings: curious glances at the grocery store, respectful nods from strangers who recognized him from local news coverage, direct questions from children whose parents quickly shushed them. Jared developed standard responses to navigate these interactions without reliving the trauma each time, a skill Dr. Chen had helped him cultivate through role-playing exercises during therapy. His psychological recovery continued alongside physical healing, less visible but equally important. Nightmares still occurred occasionally, though their frequency had diminished. Certain sounds, particularly rustling in dense vegetation, triggered momentary anxiety that he was learning to recognize and address through breathing techniques and grounding exercises. Therapy sessions with Dr. Chen had transitioned from twice weekly to weekly, focusing increasingly on future orientation rather than trauma processing. During one such session, Jared broached a subject he'd been considering for several weeks. "I've been thinking about returning to Cook City," he said, the words coming more easily now that his jaw had largely healed. "Not to run the same trail, but to visit the area, maybe get some closure." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "What's motivating this consideration?" "I don't want fear to define my relationship with places I love," Jared explained. "And I left things unfinished there. Belongings at the rental cabin, a relationship with the town that ended abruptly. It feels important somehow." "That's insightful," she responded. "Many trauma survivors find symbolic value in revisiting locations associated with their experience, though timing and approach matter considerably. How would you ensure this visit supports your recovery rather than potentially setting it back?" They spent the remainder of the session developing a structured plan. Jared would travel with a companion rather than alone, stay in town rather, then the isolated cabin, and approach the visit with specific goals and boundaries. The trip would be brief, just an overnight, with flexibility to depart earlier if emotions became overwhelming. Dr. Chen suggested journaling throughout to capture reactions and insights for later processing. Jared's father volunteered to accompany him, understanding the significance of the journey without overreacting to its potential challenges. They scheduled the visit for the following weekend, a deliberate 4-month marker from the attack. The timing felt right, far enough into recovery for physical capability, but soon enough to address the psychological component before it calcified into avoidance or phobia. The drive to Cook City proved less emotionally charged than Jared had anticipated. Familiar landmarks passed without triggering flashbacks or anxiety, the beautiful Montana landscape eliciting appreciation rather than apprehension. Conversation with his father flowed naturally, ranging from family news to sports to tentative plans for Jared's continued recovery. They arrived mid-afternoon, checking into a small hotel near the center of town. "How are you feeling?" his father asked as they settled into the room. Jared considered the question thoughtfully. "Good, actually. Calmer than I expected. It helps, seeing the town as just a town, not defined by what happened." "That makes sense. Want to walk around a bit?" "The general store owner asked about you when I called to arrange cabin key pickup." The mention of the store owner brought Jared's first vivid memory of that fateful morning, the elderly man sweeping the porch, offering a casual warning about bear sightings. "Yes," he decided. "I'd like to thank him." They walked slowly through town, Jared's pace still measured by ongoing physical therapy constraints. Several locals recognized him, offering subdued greetings that acknowledged his experience without dramatizing it. The Mountain West's characteristic respect for privacy combined with community awareness. At the general store, the owner welcomed him warmly, refusing payment for supplies and expressing genuine pleasure at seeing Jared's recovery progress. "Most don't come back, you know," the man commented as they prepared to leave. "After something like that happens. But the mountains don't mean harm, bears either really, just living their lives as nature intended." Jared nodded, appreciating the simple wisdom in the statement. "That's partly why I needed to return, to remember that." Their next stop was the rental cabin, where Jared's belongings remained largely as he'd left them that September morning. The property manager had gathered his items from the bathroom and kitchen, packing them in boxes that waited in the living room, but his clothing still hung in the closet. Books remained on the bedside table. Running shoes still stood by the door, ghosts of interrupted routine. Jared moved through the space deliberately, touching objects that connected him to his pre-attack self. The experience felt surreal yet grounding, a tangible reminder that the person who had enthusiastically laced up those running shoes still existed within him, changed but not erased by subsequent events. He and his father methodically packed everything into the car, closing this chapter with respectful efficiency. That evening, over dinner at Cook City's only year-round restaurant, Jared encountered the final significant connection to his experience, Ranger Davis, who happened to be finishing his own meal as they arrived. The Ranger joined them briefly, providing updates on bear management in the area and expressing admiration for Jared's recovery progress. The sow and cubs denned for winter about 15 miles from where your encounter occurred, Davis informed. They emerged this spring and have established territory further from maintained trails. No further incidents have been reported. I'm glad to hear that, Jared said sincerely. For the bears and for hikers. Davis hesitated, then added, Your case actually prompted some revisions to our visitor education materials. We're emphasizing bear spray training more heavily and providing clearer guidance about traveling in family group territory. If you're ever interested in contributing to our safety programs, we'd welcome your perspective. This unexpected invitation resonated with Jared, suggesting a potential positive outlet for his experience, a way to transform personal trauma into public benefit. He exchanged contact information with the Ranger, promising to consider the possibility once his recovery progressed further. That night in the hotel room, Jared completed his most substantial journal entry since beginning the practice, reflecting on the day's experiences and the emotional landscape he had traversed. The writing flowed easily, without the halting quality that had characterized earlier entries. He concluded with words that surprised him with their clarity. I came seeking closure, but I'm finding something different. Continuity. The attack changed me, marked me, but didn't end me. There's a before and after, but they're connected by the same essential person. The mountains remain beautiful. The bears remain wild. I remain Jared, altered, but intact. His father, reading a book across the room, glanced up as Jared closed his laptop. Productive writing session? Yes, Jared replied simply. I think I've found what I came for. They returned to Bozeman the following day, the journey feeling more like progress than retreat. The visit had achieved its purpose, confronting the location without allowing it to retain power over Jared's emotional landscape. He shared the experience with Dr. Chen during their next session, analyzing the components that had contributed to its therapeutic value. What stands out most, he concluded, is realizing I don't have to choose between acknowledging the trauma and reclaiming my connection to wild places. Both can exist simultaneously. Dr. Chen nodded approval. That's a sophisticated integration and exactly the kind of balanced perspective that supports long-term recovery. The goal was never to erase the experience, but to contextualize it within your broader life narrative. The 6-month mark since the attack brought formal conclusion to several aspects of Jared's recovery process. Dr. Winters declared the shoulder reconstruction fully healed, transitioning him from prescribed physical therapy to independent maintenance exercises. Dr. Patel confirmed complete bone union in his jaw, requiring only annual checkups going forward. The insurance company finalized his claim, providing compensation for medical expenses not covered by his health insurance and acknowledging short-term disability through the approved period. These clinical conclusions, however, didn't address the financial challenges that had accumulated during his recovery. Even with insurance and disability benefits, the extended rehabilitation had depleted Jared's savings. Medical expenses continued with ongoing therapy, and his reduced work schedule limited income restoration. These practical concerns added stress, just as physical recovery allowed greater focus on rebuilding normal life. An unexpected solution emerged through Diana, the nurse who had helped him on the highway after the attack. Having maintained occasional contact, she called one evening with a suggestion. There's this platform called GoFundMe, she explained. People use it to help others with medical expenses or after accidents. Tom and I were thinking, with your permission, we could set up a campaign to help with your remaining bills. Your story really touched people around here. Jared's initial instinct was to decline. Self-reliance ran deep in his character, and accepting financial assistance from strangers felt uncomfortably like charity. But practical reality tempered this response. Medical debt would significantly impair his ability to move forward, potentially forcing difficult choices between continued therapy and financial stability. After thoughtful consideration and discussion with his parents and Dr. Chen, Jared agreed to the campaign with specific parameters, a defined goal amount covering remaining medical expenses rather than an open-ended request, and direct involvement in crafting the narrative to ensure accuracy without sensationalism. Diana and Tom established the fundraiser with these guidelines, sharing it through local networks and outdoor community forums. The response exceeded everyone's expectations. Within 2 weeks, the campaign surpassed its goal, with contributions coming from across Montana and neighboring states, outdoor enthusiasts nationwide, and even international donors connected to wilderness safety initiatives. Many contributors included personal messages expressing admiration for Jared's resilience and sharing their own wilderness encounters or recovery journeys. This outpouring of support affected Jared profoundly, challenging his perception of independence and community. The experience of receiving help graciously became another dimension of his recovery, learning that mutual support, rather than isolated self-reliance, represented true strength. In his journal, he reflected on this unexpected lesson. I've always defined myself through self-sufficiency, measuring success by how little I needed from others. This experience is teaching me that connection and interdependence aren't weaknesses, but different kinds of strength. Accepting help honors the givers as much as it benefits the receiver. With financial pressures alleviated, Jared could focus more completely on rebuilding his life beyond survival and basic recovery. He increased his work hours gradually, transitioning back to the office environment with colleagues who had supported him throughout his absence. The routine of professional engagement provided structure and purpose, though he found his priorities had shifted subtly. Workplace stress affected him less, while meaningful interactions and work-life balance gained importance. 7 months. After the attack, physical therapist cleared Jared for moderate running on level terrain, a milestone he had anticipated with mixed emotions. His first attempt was modest by former standards, just 2 miles on a flat path near his parents' home, his father walking nearby as a precaution. The familiar rhythm of feet striking ground brought unexpected emotion, both joy at reclaiming this fundamental activity and awareness of how much had changed since his last run. His body responded differently now. The repaired shoulder ached with the repetitive motion. His breathing pattern had altered to accommodate the formerly broken ribs. His stride showed subtle asymmetry from compensatory patterns developed during recovery. More significant were the psychological differences: heightened awareness of surroundings, momentary, startled responses to unexpected movements in peripheral vision, conscious assessment of potential threats that had previously registered only subconsciously, if at all. Jared increased running distance and frequency gradually, building confidence alongside conditioning. His route selections remained conservative, populated park paths rather than isolated trails, open terrain with good visibility, areas without significant bear populations. Whether these choices reflected temporary caution or permanent change in risk assessment remained unclear, even to himself. During this period of cautious reintegration of former activities, Jared received an email from Ranger Davis following up on their conversation in Cook City. The Gallatin National Forest was developing enhanced bear safety educational materials and planning summer workshops for recreational users. Davis invited Jared to participate as a speaker, sharing his experience within a broader curriculum about wildlife safety and responsible wilderness use. The invitation prompted careful consideration. Public speaking had never been Jared's strength, and discussing his experience before an audience would require emotional vulnerability he wasn't sure he could manage. Conversely, the opportunity to transform his traumatic experience into educational value appealed to his pragmatic nature. He discussed the invitation with Dr. Chen, weighing potential benefits against psychological risks. Consider a graduated approach, she suggested. Perhaps begin with a recorded interview that can be edited and incorporated into their materials. If that feels manageable, progress to small group presentations before considering larger audiences. The key is maintaining control over your narrative while recognizing your limitations. Following this advice, Jared proposed a modified involvement to Ranger Davis, beginning with a structured interview for educational videos, with possible expansion to live presentations as his comfort allowed. The Ranger readily agreed, arranging a recording session with professional videographers who specialized in conservation education content. The interview proved challenging but cathartic, allowing Jared to articulate his experience within a constructive framework. He emphasized preparation, appropriate responses, and the importance of understanding bear behavior as natural rather than malicious. The resulting educational video presented his encounter as a case study in both wilderness risk management and survival techniques, highlighting decisions that both contributed to the attack and enabled his survival afterward. As his first year post-attack approached, Jared found himself increasingly contemplative about the long-term impact of his experience. Physical recovery had plateaued at approximately 90% of pre-injury function, excellent by medical standards, but noticeably different in lived experience. His shoulder maintained slight restriction in certain movements, his jaw occasionally ached with weather changes, and the scars on his torso had faded from angry red to silvery white, but remained clearly visible. More significant were the psychological and philosophical changes that had emerged throughout recovery. His relationship with wilderness had transformed, not diminished but deepened, informed by first-hand understanding of its fundamental neutrality. Nature was neither malevolent nor benevolent, but simply present, operating according to patterns and imperatives beyond human moral constructs. This perspective brought both heightened caution and renewed appreciation for wild places. Jared's social connections had evolved as well. Some friendships had strengthened through the crucible of crisis and recovery, while others had faded with shifting priorities and perspectives. New relationships had formed with unexpected allies. Diana and Tom remained occasional but meaningful correspondents, and he had connected with several other bear attack survivors through an online support network, sharing experiences that few others could fully comprehend. Professional aspirations had shifted subtly. While Jared continued his accounting career, his increasing involvement with wilderness education programs provided complementary purpose. The Ranger-led workshops had expanded to include quarterly presentations at outdoor equipment retailers and community centers, with Jared's recorded interview evolving to occasional live presentations as his confidence grew. These engagements remained challenging but rewarding, transforming private trauma into public benefit. Even his recreational patterns reflected the enduring impact of his encounter. Though running remained central to his physical activity, Jared had diversified his exercise routines to include more group-based outdoor pursuits, joining a local hiking club, participating in organized trail maintenance projects, occasionally serving as safety coordinator for charity running events. Solo backcountry adventures, once his preferred mode of wilderness engagement, held less appeal now, replaced by appreciation for shared experiences and collective responsibility. An unexpected development emerged through these community connections, an invitation to coach youth cross-country for a local middle school. The athletic director, who had attended one of Jared's bear safety presentations, recognized qualities that might translate well to mentoring young runners: patience developed through rehabilitation, respect for natural environments, appreciation for balanced risk assessment. The proposition initially seemed improbable to Jared, whose self-image didn't include teaching or leadership roles. However, after observing a practice session and speaking with current coaches, he found himself intrigued by the possibility. The program emphasized inclusive participation rather than elite competition, focusing on developing lifelong appreciation for outdoor activity in diverse young people, values that aligned with his evolved perspective. After considerable reflection, Jared accepted a volunteer assistant coach position for the spring season, committing to 2 afternoons weekly plus occasional weekend meets. The role required certification in youth coaching and first aid, training he completed during winter months, while continuing his primary career and other commitments. His first day with the middle school team brought unexpected nervousness. Facing 20 curious 12 to 14-year-olds proved more intimidating than adult wilderness safety audiences. The head coach introduced him simply as Coach Simmons, an experienced trail runner who's joining our team this season, without mentioning his attack. Nevertheless, several students clearly recognized him, whispering among themselves as practice began. Rather than ignoring their curiosity, Jared addressed it directly during warm-up exercises. "I'm guessing some of you have heard about what happened to me last year," he acknowledged. "If you have questions, you can ask. But right now, we're here to focus on becoming better runners and teammates." This straightforward approach appeared to satisfy immediate curiosity while establishing appropriate boundaries. Over subsequent practices, individual students occasionally approached with thoughtful questions about his experience, which Jared answered honestly but age-appropriately, emphasizing safety protocols and respect for wildlife. These brief exchanges built rapport while reinforcing educational value rather than sensationalizing the attack. Coaching introduced unexpected joy to Jared's recovery journey, watching young runners develop skills and confidence, witnessing their genuine excitement when achieving personal goals, guiding their understanding of both competition and cooperation. He found particular satisfaction working with hesitant participants, those intimidated by either physical challenges or social dynamics within the team. His own experience with vulnerability and rebuilding confidence provided uncommon insight into their struggles. Their spring season culminated in a regional meet where several team members achieved significant personal improvements. Though not a championship-caliber squad by competitive standards, the group had developed remarkable camaraderie and mutual support, qualities the coaches had prioritized throughout training. The head coach invited Jared to continue in an expanded role the following year, an offer he accepted without the hesitation that had accompanied his initial involvement. As the one-year anniversary of the attack approached, Jared debated how to acknowledge the date. Part of him felt compelled to mark the occasion significantly, while another part questioned whether highlighting the calendar date might overemphasize an experience he had worked to integrate rather than define him. He discussed the dilemma with Dr. Chen during what had become monthly rather than weekly therapy sessions. Anniversaries of traumatic events often carry psychological weight, regardless of our conscious intentions, she observed. Creating meaningful acknowledgement can help process that energy constructively, rather than having it emerge in less intentional ways. Taking this guidance to heart, Jared designed a private ritual for the day, a morning spent volunteering with a habitat conservation project, followed by lunch with his parents, an afternoon coaching the cross-country team, and evening reflection through journal writing. The balanced itinerary represented his evolved perspective, honoring the wilderness while maintaining safe engagement, acknowledging family support, contributing to youth, development, and processing the experience through personal contemplation. The anniversary itself passed with less on the attack itself than on the journey since, the challenges overcome, lessons incorporated, and new directions emerging. His journal entry concluded, "1 year. Virgo, today I encountered the raw essence of wilderness, beautiful, powerful, indifferent to human presence yet responding to human intrusion. In those moments beneath the grizzly, I was reduced to my most fundamental self, a vulnerable animal fighting for survival among other vulnerable animals. Everything since has been reconstruction, not just of bone and tissue, but of perspective and purpose. The bear walks still in wild places, following ancient patterns of survival. I walk still in human places, following new patterns of my own making. We are both changed by our encounter, the bear perhaps through reinforced wariness of human scent, I through deeper understanding of my place in nature's complex web, neither diminished, neither triumphant, simply continuing our separate journeys with the memory of momentary violent intersection. The scars remain, silver lines mapping the points of contact between our worlds. I've stopped seeing them as disfigurement and recognized them as text, a corporeal journal recording something vital about existence that I might otherwise never have learned. The lesson continues to unfold page by page, day by day, in directions I could never have anticipated before that September morning on Republic Creek Trail." With these words, Jared closed his journal, marking not an ending, but a transition. From recovery defined by looking backward to life oriented toward whatever lay ahead, informed by but not constrained by the bear that had briefly held his fate between powerful jaws before releasing him back to his human journey forever. marked but ultimately free. Now let's move on to the story of the next survivor. Zoe Martinez adjusted her camera strap, securing the Canon DSLR her parents had given her for her 17th birthday last month. The late May sunshine filtered through the canopy of oak and maple trees in Pennsylvania's Allegheny National Forest, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. She'd been looking forward to this family picnic for weeks, not just for the chance to spend time with her parents and older brother before he left for summer internship, but also for the opportunity to capture some nature photographs for her portfolio. The college application process loomed just months away, and Zoe hoped her photography might help set her application apart. "I'm going to check out those wildflowers we saw on the drive-in," Zoe called over her shoulder to her mother, who was spreading a red-checkered tablecloth across the wooden picnic table. Elena Martinez looked up, momentarily shielding her eyes from the sun. "Don't go too far, mija. Stay where you can still hear us." "I won't," Zoe promised, already backing away, toward the narrow trail that led deeper into the forest. "I'll be back in 20 minutes tops." Her father, Daniel, was preoccupied with getting the portable grill started, while her 19-year-old brother, Miguel, was hauling the cooler from the back of their SUV. It was their first real family outing since Miguel had returned from his freshman year at Penn State 3 days ago. "Take your phone," Miguel called out, but Zoe was already disappearing around a bend in the trail, her dark ponytail bouncing with each step. Zoe breathed in deeply as she walked, savoring the earthy smell of the forest. The trailhead sign had mentioned that Allegheny National Forest was home to black bears, but like most visitors, she wasn't particularly concerned. Black bears were generally shy around humans, and the crowded picnic area they'd chosen was unlikely to attract wildlife. Besides, she wasn't planning to go far, just to the clearing she'd spotted from the road, where a riot of spring wildflowers bloomed in a sun-drenched meadow. The forest floor was soft beneath her hiking boots, cushioned by years of fallen leaves and pine needles. Zoe paused occasionally to photograph interesting fungi, or the way sunlight streamed through the trees. Photography had been her passion since 8th grade, when her art teacher had noticed her eye for composition and encouraged her to join the school's photography club. Now, as a rising senior at Pittsburgh's Oakland Catholic High School, Zoe dreamed of studying photojournalism or environmental photography in college. After about 10 minutes of walking, the trees began to thin and Zoe could see the edge of the clearing up ahead. She quickened her pace, eager to reach the wildflowers before the optimal afternoon light faded. The meadow was even more beautiful than she'd anticipated, a tapestry of purple lupines, orange butterfly weed, and delicate white daisies swaying gently in the breeze. Zoe spent several minutes adjusting her camera settings, then began moving slowly through the meadow, crouching low to capture close-ups of individual blooms. She was so absorbed in her photography that she didn't immediately register the rustling sound from the far edge of the clearing, where the meadow met the denser forest once again. When she finally looked up, the black bear was already halfway across the meadow. Zoe froze, her finger hovering over the shutter button. The bear was medium-sized, perhaps a young adult, with glossy black fur that shone in the afternoon sun. It moved with surprising grace for an animal of its size, head low to the ground as it ambled through the wildflowers. It didn't appear to have noticed her yet, and Zoe's first instinct was to raise her camera and capture this unexpected wildlife encounter. The click of the shutter seemed impossibly loud in the quiet meadow. The bear's head snapped up, ears perked forward as it located the source of the sound, its small eyes fixed on Zoe, who remained crouched among the flowers. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Zoe recalled the wildlife safety brochures at the visitor center. If you encounter a black bear, make yourself look large, make noise, back away slowly, never run. Slowly, Zoe began to stand, raising her arms to appear larger. "Hey, bear," she called, trying to keep her voice steady and firm. "I'm just leaving now." The bear rose onto its hind legs, towering over the wildflowers. As it tried to get a better look at the human intruder, Zoe's heart hammered against her ribs as she continued to back away, step by careful step, toward the trail that had brought her to the meadow. Then, without warning, the bear dropped to all fours and charged. Zoe's training abandoned her in an instant. Despite knowing better, she turned and ran, her camera bouncing against her chest, her boots pounding the soft earth. She could hear the bear crashing through the vegetation behind her, covering ground. much faster than she could hold organs as she'd been taught, but the bear's weight made it impossible to move. The attack lasted only seconds, though to Zoe it felt like an eternity. Then, inexplicably, the pressure on her back eased. The bear backed away, huffing and popping its jaws, signs of agitation. Zoe remained motionless, face pressed into the dirt, afraid that any movement might provoke another attack. She could feel warm blood soaking through her jeans where the bear had bitten her leg. The pain was intense, but somehow distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Shock, she realized dimly. I'm in shock. A new sound penetrated her fog of pain and fear, her brother's voice shouting her name. Then another sound, the metallic clang of something being struck repeatedly. Zoe risked turning her head just enough to see Miguel at the edge of the meadow, banging a small cooler against a tree trunk and yelling at the top of his lungs. The bear, startled by this new, loud presence, backed farther away from Zoe. It swung its head between the injured girl on the ground and the shouting young man at the tree line, clearly agitated and uncertain. Miguel continued to advance, creating as much noise as possible. "Zoe, don't move!" he shouted between clangs of the cooler. "Dad's coming with the bear spray." The bear huffed again, took one last look at Zoe, then turned and lumbered quickly toward the opposite side of the meadow, disappearing into the trees. Only when it was completely out of sight did Miguel rush to his sister's side, dropping to his knees beside her. "Oh God, Zoe," he breathed, eyes widening at the sight of the blood soaking through her jeans. "Can you move? We need to get you back to the picnic area." Zoe tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak. She swallowed hard and tried again. "My leg. It bit my leg." "I know, I can see." "Dad!" Miguel called over his shoulder as Daniel Martinez burst into the clearing, a canister of bear spray clutched in his hand. "The bear's gone, but Zoe's hurt bad." Daniel dropped to his knees, beside his children, face pale with fear. "Mija, where are you hurt?" "My calf," Zoe managed, the initial shock beginning to fade, allowing the full force of the pain to register. "It bit my right leg, and I think my wrist is hurt from the fall." Daniel pulled a clean bandana from his pocket and pressed it against the wound on Zoe's leg, eliciting a gasp of pain. "Miguel, help me get her up. We need to get her to the car. Elena's already called 911, but the ranger said it could be 20 minutes before emergency services reach us. We'll meet them at the main road." With Miguel on one side and her father on the other, Zoe struggled to her feet. Her right leg buckled immediately when she tried to put weight on it, and she bit back a cry of pain. "I've got you," Miguel assured her, taking more of her weight. "Lean on me." The journey back to the picnic area seemed interminable. Each step sent fresh waves of pain through Zoe's injured leg, and by the time they emerged from the forest trail, she was dizzy and nauseated. Her mother's face crumpled at the sight of her bloodied daughter, stumbling between her husband and son. "The rangers are on their way," Eleanor said, rushing forward to help. "And an ambulance is meeting us at the park entrance." "Oh, Zoe, what happened?" "Bear." Zoe managed through gritted teeth as they helped her into the back seat of the family's SUV. In the meadow, Elena climbed in beside her daughter, pressing a clean towel against the wound, while Daniel started the engine and Miguel jumped into the passenger seat. As they drove carefully but quickly along the winding park road, Eleanor used bottled water to clean the dirt from Zoe's face, murmuring reassurances in a mix of English and Spanish. "You're going to be okay, Mija. The ambulance will be waiting. For us, just hold on." Zoe nodded weakly, fighting against the wave of darkness that threatened to engulf her consciousness. The pain in her leg had settled into a fierce, throbbing rhythm that matched her rapid heartbeat. Her left wrist, too, was beginning to swell where she had landed on it during the fall. They reached the park entrance to find a Warren County Sheriff's deputy already waiting, with an ambulance pulling in right behind them. Within minutes, EMTs had transferred Zoe to a stretcher and were assessing her injuries while a park ranger took an initial report from Daniel and Miguel. "She's got a substantial bite wound to the right calf," one of the EMTs informed the Martinez family as his partner started an IV line in Zoe's arm. "Looks like some muscle damage, but the major blood vessels appear intact. We're going to stabilize her and transport her to Warren General Hospital." "I'm going with her," Elena said immediately, already gathering her purse. "Of course," the EMT nodded. "One parent can ride along. The rest of you can follow in your vehicle." As they loaded Zoe into the ambulance, the park ranger, A stocky woman in her 40s with a nameplate that read Collins approached Daniel. "Sir, we'll need a full statement about the bear encounter. This is the first reported attack in this section of the forest this season. Can it wait?" Daniel asked, watching anxiously as the ambulance doors closed with his wife and daughter inside. "I need to get to the hospital." Ranger Collins nodded understandingly. "Of course. Go to the hospital with your family. I'll come by later to take statements from all of you. We'll need to locate this bear and assess whether it poses an ongoing threat to visitors." The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, with Daniel and Miguel following close behind in the family SUV. The 20-minute drive to Warren General Hospital passed in tense silence, broken only when Miguel finally spoke. "I should have gone with her," he said, gripping the door handle tightly. "I knew she was going into the woods alone." "This isn't your fault," Daniel replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "None of us could have predicted this. The important thing is that you scared the bear off before it could hurt her worse." Miguel nodded but didn't seem convinced. "She froze when she saw me, the bear, I mean. I was worried she was going to charge at me instead, but she just looked confused and then ran off." "You did exactly the right thing," Daniel assured him. "Making noise, making yourself look big, that's what all the wildlife safety guides tell you to do." They arrived at the hospital to find Elena pacing in the emergency department waiting room. "They've taken her back already," she reported. "They're cleaning the wound and assessing the damage. A doctor will come talk to us soon." The three of them settled into the uncomfortable plastic chairs of the waiting room, joining other families in various states of worry. A local news report played silently on a wall-mounted television showing footage of a wildfire in California. After nearly an hour, a doctor in blue scrubs approached them. "Martinez family?" When they nodded and stood, he continued, "I'm Dr. Patel. Zoe is stable and doing well. The bite wound on her calf is significant, but fortunately didn't damage any major blood vessels or tendons. We've thoroughly cleaned the wound and given her antibiotics to prevent infection, which is our primary concern with animal bites." "Will she need surgery?" Daniel asked. "Not at this time," Dr. Patel replied. "The tissue damage is moderate. We've closed what we could with sutures, but some areas will need to heal by secondary intention, from the inside out. She also has a sprained wrist from the fall, which we've immobilized with a brace. She'll be in pain for a while and she'll have some scarring, but with proper care she should recover full function of her leg." "Oh, thank God," Elena breathed, clutching Daniel's hand. "We'd like to keep her overnight for observation and to ensure the antibiotics are working properly," Dr. Patel continued. "Animal bites, especially from wild animals, carry a high risk of infection. We've reported the incident to the county health department, as is required with wild animal attacks, and they may want to test the bear for rabies if it's captured." "Can we see her?" Miguel asked. Dr. Patel nodded. "She's being moved to a room now. A nurse will come get you once she's settled. She's been given pain medication, so she may be a bit groggy." As the doctor walked away, Ranger Collins appeared in the emergency department doorway, scanning the waiting room until she spotted the Martinez family. She approached them with a clipboard in hand. "How is she?" the ranger asked first, genuine concern in her voice. "She'll be okay," Daniel replied. "They're admitting her overnight, but the doctor says she should recover well." "That's a relief," Collins said sincerely. "I hate to intrude at a time like this, but I do need to get some information about the encounter. It helps us manage the wildlife and protect other visitors." The family agreed, and Ranger Collins led them to a quieter corner of the waiting room. "So from the beginning, where exactly were you picnicking and where did the encounter occur?" Daniel described their location in the forest and the meadow where Zoe had gone to photograph wildflowers. Miguel detailed how he had heard his sisters scream and rushed to help, grabbing the small cooler as a makeshift noisemaker on his way. "And you didn't see any cubs with the bear?" Collins asked, making notes on her clipboard. "No," Miguel shook his head. "Just the one bear. It wasn't huge, maybe medium-sized. I don't know much about bears. Probably a young adult male," Collins mused. "They can be more unpredictable, especially if they're hungry or were surprised. Did Zoe approach the bear, or was she making any unusual sounds?" "She wouldn't have approached a bear," Eleanor said firmly. "She was just taking pictures of flowers." "Of course," Collins nodded. "Sometimes even the sound of a camera shutter can startle wildlife." Zoe was pale against the white hospital sheets, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Her left wrist was encased in a brace, and her right leg was elevated slightly on a pillow, thick bandages visible beneath the hospital gown. Despite the pain medication, her face tightened with discomfort when she tried to shift position as her family entered the room. "Hey," she said weakly, attempting a smile. "So much for our family picnic, huh?" Elena was at her side immediately, stroking her hair. "Don't worry about that. We're just so thankful you're okay." "Define okay," Zoe said with a grimace. "Everything hurts, and the doctor said I'll probably have a scar the size of Texas on my leg." "Battle scars," Miguel said, trying to lighten the mood. "Very badass. The college admissions people will be impressed." This drew a small laugh from Zoe, which quickly turned into a wince. "Don't make me laugh, it hurts." "What happened out there, Mija?" Daniel asked gently, taking a seat on the edge of the bed. "Did you see the bear before it charged?" Zoe nodded, her expression growing serious. "It was just there in the meadow. I was taking pictures of the flowers, and when I looked up it was maybe 30 yards away. I don't think it had noticed me yet, so I took a picture." She closed her eyes, briefly, clearly regretting this decision. The shutter sound got its attention, and it stood up on its hind legs. I tried to back away slowly, like they tell you to, but then it just charged. "You couldn't have known it would react that way," Elena reassured her. "I should have," Zoe insisted. "We read the warning signs at the trailhead. I just never thought... I mean, you always hear that black bears are shy." "Usually they are," Daniel agreed. "But they're still wild animals, unpredictable. And if you startled it... The ranger wants to talk to you tomorrow," Miguel added. "They're trying to find the bear." Zoe's eyes widened. "Are they going to kill it? It was my fault. I surprised it in its territory." "We don't know yet what they'll do," Daniel said. "That's why they need your account of what happened. But right now you need to rest and recover." A nurse entered then to check Zoe's vital signs and administer another dose of pain medication. "You should all go home and get some rest," she advised the family. "Visiting hours start again at 9 tomorrow morning." "I'm staying," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll sleep in the chair." After some discussion, it was agreed that Eleanor would stay overnight with Zoe, while Daniel and Miguel would return to Pittsburgh to retrieve clothes and necessities for an extended stay in Warren. They'd return first thing in the morning. As the medication began to take effect, Zoe's eyelids grew heavy. Her last conscious thought before drifting off was of the bear, not the frightening, charging predator that had attacked her, but the magnificent creature she had initially seen moving peacefully through the wildflowers. She wondered if she had managed to capture that moment with her camera before everything went wrong. The night passed in a blur of intermittent sleep, nurse checks, and waves of pain that broke through the medication. Zoe dreamed of running through endless meadows of flowers, always with the sense of something large and dark pursuing her. Each time she startled awake, her mother was there, murmuring reassurances and helping her adjust her position to minimize the discomfort. Morning brought a shift change of nurses, a hospital breakfast that Zoe merely picked at, and Dr. Patel making rounds to check on her progress. "The wound looks good so far," he announced after examining her leg. "No signs of infection yet, but we'll keep you on IV antibiotics today and switch you to oral antibiotics before discharge. How's the pain level?" 7 out of 10, Zoe admitted. "It throbs constantly, and it feels like something's crushing." "My calf. That's the tissue swelling," Dr. Patel explained. "We'll continue the pain management and elevate the leg to help reduce the swelling. I'd like to see you walking a bit today, with assistance and a walker. Movement within reason will actually help the healing process." Shortly after the doctor left, Daniel and Miguel arrived with overnight bags and Zoe's favorite blanket from home. They'd barely settled in when Ranger Collins knocked on the open door of the hospital room. "Good morning," she greeted them. "How are you feeling today, Zoe?" "Like I got attacked by a bear," Zoe replied dryly, which earned her a small smile from the Ranger. "Fair enough," Collins acknowledged. "If you're up to it, I'd like to get your account of what happened. It will help us determine what to do about the bear." Zoe recounted her experience in detail, from entering the meadow to photograph the wildflowers to the moment the bear charged. She was particularly careful to emphasize that she had startled the bear with her camera, and that the attack had stopped when Miguel arrived making noise. "So it doesn't sound like a predatory attack," Collins noted, jotting down information. "The bear didn't follow you or seem intent on continuing the attack once you were down. That suggests a defensive response. which is typical black bear behavior when they feel threatened or surprised. So you won't kill it? Zoe asked anxiously. Based on your description, relocation is more likely than euthanasia, Collins confirmed. But I should tell you that we haven't located the bear yet. We've set up trail cameras and a few non-lethal traps in the area. If we catch it, the plan is to tranquilize it, tag it, and relocate it to a more remote section of the forest. What about rabies? Elena asked. The doctor mentioned testing. Black bears rarely carry rabies, Collins assured her. But yes, if we capture it, we'll observe it for symptoms before relocation. In the extremely unlikely event that it did have rabies, you'd be notified immediately so Zoe could receive preventative treatment. After finishing her interview with Zoe, Ranger Collins provided the family with paperwork for an official incident report and information about potential insurance claims related to the attack. The Forest Service maintains records of all wildlife encounters, she explained. It helps us track patterns and manage wildlife appropriately. When the ranger had gone, Zoe sank back against her pillows, exhausted from the conversation. I keep thinking about my camera, she admitted. I don't even know if it survived the attack, or if the pictures I took are still on it. Miguel found it in the meadow when we went back for the car yesterday, Daniel told her. It has some dirt and a cracked display, but it seems intact otherwise. We'll check the memory card when we get home. In the afternoon, a physical therapist visited to help Zoe take her first tentative steps since the attack. The pain was intense, bringing tears to her eyes as she cautiously put weight on her injured leg, but she persisted, determined not to let the bear encounter define her recovery. You're doing great, the therapist encouraged her as she slowly made her way around the room with the aid of a walker. The muscle damage in your calf will take time to heal, but with consistent physical therapy, you should regain full function. By evening, local news of the bear attack had begun to spread. A reporter from the Warren Times-Observer called the hospital room, asking for an interview about Zoe's experience. After some discussion, the family declined, preferring to maintain their privacy while Zoe recovered. I don't want to be bear attack girl, Zoe said firmly. It's bad enough that I'll have to explain this to everyone at school when senior year starts. Despite their refusal, a brief article appeared in the next morning's paper, describing an unnamed teenage girl who had been attacked by a black bear in Allegheny National Forest. The article included quotes from Ranger Collins about bear safety and noted that rangers were attempting to locate and relocate the animal. Dr. Patel visited again the following morning, pleased with Zoe's progress. The wound looks clean, and your blood work shows no signs of infection. If you continue to improve today, I think we can discharge you tomorrow morning. You'll need to follow up with your primary care physician in Pittsburgh, and I'm prescribing a course of physical therapy to help with the muscle recovery. The prospect of returning home lifted Zoe's spirits considerably. The hospital room, despite her family's constant presence, had begun to feel claustrophobic, and she longed for the comfort of her own bed. Later that day, as she was practicing her walking in the hospital corridor with Miguel's support, her phone pinged with notifications from Instagram and Twitter. When she checked, she discovered that someone had shared the newspaper article about her attack, and her friends from school were speculating wildly about whether she was the unnamed victim. Great, she muttered. So much for keeping this quiet. Miguel peered over her shoulder at the notifications. You could just ignore it, you know, or make a joke out of it. Yes, I got attacked by a bear. No big deal. College applications are scarier. The suggestion made Zoe smile despite her frustration. Maybe, or maybe I'll use it for my college application essay. How a bear attack taught me to appreciate life, or something equally cheesy. Hey, whatever. Works? Miguel shrugged. Admissions officers eat that stuff up, overcoming adversity and all that. When they returned to the room, they found Daniel engaged in what appeared to be a tense phone conversation. Yes, I understand it's standard procedure, he was saying, but as I've told you, we're not interested in pursuing any legal action. No, we don't want to speak with your legal department. My daughter is still recovering. He ended the call with a sigh. The Forest Service's insurance adjusters, he explained. They're concerned we might sue because of the attack. I told them, we just want to focus on getting Zoe home and healthy. Could we sue? Zoe asked curiously. I mean, it's not like they put the bear there on purpose. Technically, yes, Daniel replied. There have been cases where visitors sued parks or forests after wildlife attacks, usually claiming inadequate warnings or negligence, but that's not something we're considering. The rangers did their job, the warning signs were posted, and they've been responsive since the incident. That evening, Ranger Collins returned with news. They had tracked and tranquilized a black bear that matched the description of Zoe's attacker. It's a young male, about 3 years old, she reported. No signs of disease or injury that might explain unusual aggression. We've tagged him and plan to relocate him tomorrow to a more remote area of the forest, about 60 miles from the attack site. How can you be sure it's the same bear? Elena asked. We can't be 100% certain, Collins admitted, but it was in the right area, matches the size description, and, this is key, when we examined its paws, we found blue fibers that appear to match Zoe's genes. We've sent them to the lab for confirmation, but we're reasonably confident it's the same animal. The news brought Zoe a strange sense of closure. She had been worried about the bear's fate, despite her trauma, and was relieved to know it wouldn't be euthanized. Will he be okay? After being moved, I mean? Collins smiled at Zoe's concern for the animal that had injured her. Black bears are adaptable. He'll establish a new territory and hopefully learn to give humans a wider berth in the future. The next morning, Dr. Patel signed Zoe's discharge papers. He provided detailed instructions for wound care, a prescription for oral antibiotics and pain medication, and a referral to a physical therapist in Pittsburgh. The sutures will need to be removed in about 10 days, he told them, and the open portions of the wound will need regular cleaning and dressing changes. The scar will be significant, but it will fade somewhat over time. As Daniel completed the discharge paperwork at the nurse's station, Eleanor helped Zoe change from the hospital gown into loose sweatpants that would accommodate the bulky bandage on her calf. Miguel had gone to bring the car around to the hospital entrance. How are you feeling about going home? Eleanor asked as she helped Zoe tie her shoelaces. Zoe considered the question, relieved mostly, but also, I don't know, different somehow. Like everything looks the same, but feels different. Eleanor nodded understandingly. Traumatic experiences change us. It's normal to feel that way. I keep replaying it in my mind, Zoe admitted quietly, wondering what I could have done differently if I hadn't taken that picture. You can't think that way, Mija, Elena said firmly. What happened, happened. You survived. That's what matters now. A nurse arrived with a wheelchair to transport Zoe to the exit, hospital policy for all discharged patients. As they made their way through the corridors, Zoe felt a curious mix of emotions: relief to be leaving, anxiety about the recovery ahead, and a lingering fear when she thought about the bear and those moments in the meadow. The drive back to Pittsburgh took nearly 2 hours. Zoe spent most of it dozing in the back seat, the pain medication making her drowsy. When she was awake, she watched the forested landscape rolling by outside the window, unable to look at the trees without imagining dark shapes moving between them. Their house in Pittsburgh's Squirrel Hill neighborhood was a welcome sight after the sterile environment of the hospital. Miguel carried Zoe's bag, while Daniel helped her navigate the front steps with her newly acquired crutches. Inside, the familiar surroundings offered comfort, though Zoe was dismayed to discover how challenging it would be to maneuver through the 2-story house with her injured leg. We've set up the sofa bed in the den for now, Elena explained, leading her toward the back of the house. Just until you're more mobile. That way you won't have to deal with the stairs to your bedroom. The den had been transformed into a temporary bedroom, with Zoe's favorite pillows and blankets arranged on the sofa bed, her laptop and books on the side table, and a small vase of fresh flowers, not wildflowers, Zoe noted with relief, on the desk. This is perfect, she said, lowering herself carefully onto the edge of the bed. Thanks, Mom. Your abuela called while you were sleeping in the car, Elena told her. She's been lighting candles for you since she heard about the attack, and your tia Maria wants to come visit next weekend to help out. Zoe nodded, touched by her extended family's concern, but also overwhelmed by the attention her injury was generating. Even her cousins in California had sent text messages asking for details about the bear attack. That evening, as the family ate dinner together in the den, so Zoe wouldn't have to move to the dining room, Miguel connected Zoe's camera to his laptop to check whether any of the photos from the meadow had survived. The memory card seems fine, he reported, scrolling through the images. There are a bunch of wildflower shots and... Whoa. He turned the laptop screen toward Zoe. There, in perfect focus, despite the distance, was the black bear. The photograph had captured it mid-stride as it moved through the meadow, head low, powerful muscles visible beneath the glossy fur. It was a beautiful image and chilling, knowing what had happened moments after it was taken. "You got it," Daniel said, leaning in to see. "That's an incredible shot, Zoe." "The last thing I photographed before it noticed me," Zoe said softly. "Can you go back to the flower pictures? I don't think I want to look at the bear right now." Miguel quickly switched to the earlier photographs of wildflowers. The images were vibrant and skillfully composed, showcasing Zoe's talent for finding unique angles and capturing natural light. In any other context, they would have been a source of pure pride and joy. Now they were inextricably linked to the trauma that had followed. "We should print some of these for your portfolio," Elena suggested, recognizing her daughter's mixed emotions. "They're beautiful, Mija." Zoe nodded, unable to fully appreciate her work through the lens of what had happened afterward. She was saved from having to respond further by the ringing of the doorbell. "That'll be Lisa and her mum," Miguel said, closing the laptop. "They texted earlier asking if they could stop by." Lisa Chen had been Zoe's best friend since 6th grade. They had already made plans to be roommates if they both got into their dream school, Carnegie Mellon University. News of Zoe's injury had reached Lisa almost immediately, thanks to the social media speculation following the newspaper article. Lisa burst into the den with her characteristic energy, though she pulled up short when she saw Zoe's bandaged leg elevated on pillows. "Oh my God, Zoe, it's true. You really did get attacked by a bear." "Hello to you too," Zoe replied dryly, but she was smiling. Lisa's directness was exactly what she needed after days of careful concern from her family and medical staff. Lisa's mother, Susan, followed more sedately, carrying a casserole dish. "I brought baked ziti," she told Elena. "I figured cooking might be the last thing on your mind right now." While the mothers retreated to the kitchen, Lisa perched on the edge of Zoe's bed, peppering her with questions about the attack. Unlike the tentative inquiries from her family, Lisa's straightforward curiosity was easier for Zoe to handle. "Did you think you were going to die?" Lisa asked, wide-eyed. "Honestly, yes," Zoe admitted. "When it was on top of me and I felt its teeth, I thought that was it." "And your brother just charged in with a cooler? That's badass." "He was pretty brave," Zoe agreed, though he says he was terrified the whole time. "The whole school's talking about it," Lisa informed her. "Kenzie showed everyone the newspaper article in AP Bio yesterday. Mr. Ross actually used it as an opportunity to discuss predator behavior and fight-or-flight responses." Zoe groaned. "Great, so I'm officially a science lesson now." "More like a legend," Lisa corrected her. "Not everyone can say they survived a bear attack. It's like the ultimate Pittsburgh street cred." Despite herself, Zoe laughed. "Because that's exactly what I was going for when I went to take pictures of flowers." They spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. School gossip, the summer jobs they'd lined up, the colleges they planned to apply to in the fall. For that brief time, Zoe felt normal again, not defined by the attack or her injuries. After Lisa and her mother left, however, the evening proved challenging. The pain in Zoe's leg intensified as the day's medication began to wear off, and the first attempt at changing her dressing at home was both painful and emotionally draining. The wound looked angry and raw, the sutures stark against her skin. Elena, following the detailed instructions provided by the hospital, cleaned it carefully and applied fresh bandages. But the process left Zoe shaking and fighting back tears. Night brought its own difficulties. Despite her exhaustion, Zoe found sleep elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that meadow, feeling the bear's weight crushing her into the ground. When she finally did drift off, her dreams were chaotic and frightening, filled with pursuing shadows and the sensation of falling. She woke with a gasp at 3 a.m., sweating and disoriented. It took several moments to remember where she was. Home, safe, in the den. Her leg throbbed dully beneath the blankets. After attempting unsuccessfully to find a more comfortable position, Zoe reached for her phone and began scrolling through social media, seeking distraction. Her Instagram feed was full of end-of-year celebrations as her classmates finished their junior year of high school. Final exams were next week, though Zoe's teachers had already arranged for her to complete modified versions at home once she felt well enough. The normalcy of the posts, parties, study sessions, complaints about teachers, felt surreal compared to what she had just experienced. On impulse, Zoe opened her camera roll and found the bear photograph that Miguel had recovered from her camera. In the dim light of her phone screen, the image seemed less threatening than it had earlier. She studied the bear's features, its small eyes and distinctive snout, the powerful shoulders that had so easily knocked her to the ground. There was no malice in those eyes, she realized, no evil intent, just a wild animal reacting to a perceived threat in its territory. The knowledge didn't erase her fear or trauma, but it helped her contextualize it somehow. The attack hadn't been personal, it had been nature, raw and unfiltered. Zoe finally fell back asleep with her phone still in. Her hand, the bear's image, the last thing she saw before closing her eyes. The next few days established a new routine. Mornings began with pain medication and wound care, followed by attempts at gentle movement, as prescribed by the discharge instructions. In the afternoons, Zoe tried to focus on schoolwork sent over by her teachers, though concentration often proved difficult. Evenings were for family time and early nights, as the physical and emotional toll of recovery left her exhausted. Friends visited sporadically, bringing homework, gossip, and nervous questions about the attack. Zoe found herself telling the story again and again, each retelling slightly different as she processed what had happened. Some details became sharper with repetition, while others faded or transformed in her memory. 5 days after returning home, Zoe had her first appointment with a physical therapist in Pittsburgh. The session was both encouraging and sobering. The therapist, a cheerful woman named Diane, was impressed with the healing progress but frank about the work ahead. "The muscle damage is significant," she explained, as she gently manipulated Zoe's calf. "You'll need to rebuild strength gradually. I'm going to give you exercises to do at home between our sessions, but you need to be patient with yourself. This type of injury takes time." The timeline she outlined was longer than Zoe had hoped. While she might be walking without crutches in a few weeks, it could be months before she regained full strength and flexibility in her injured leg. The prognosis cast a shadow over her summer plans, which had included a photography workshop in July and hiking with friends in August. "What about college visits?" Zoe asked anxiously. "We were planning to tour campuses in July and August." "That should be fine," Diane assured her. "By then you'll likely be walking with just a slight limp. You might need to take more breaks than usual, but there's no reason you can't participate in campus tours." The following week brought Zoe's first follow-up appointment with a local doctor who removed some of the sutures and pronounced the wound healing well. "You're young and healthy," Dr. Murray told her. "That makes a big difference in recovery time. Just keep following the wound care instructions and attending physical therapy." As promised, Ranger Collins called to update them on the bear's relocation. "We successfully moved him to a remote area in the northeastern section of the forest," she reported. "He's been tagged and will be monitored periodically by our wildlife management team." "Has there been any more unusual behavior?" Daniel asked. "None so far," Collins assured him. "Our wildlife biologists believe this was simply a case of a startled bear reacting defensively. There's no indication that he poses an ongoing threat to humans, especially in his new, more isolated territory." The conversation reminded Zoe that she still needed to complete the official incident report for the Forest Service records. Despite her initial reluctance to dwell on the attack, she found herself setting aside an evening to carefully document her experience, from entering the meadow to being rescued by Miguel. The process was unexpectedly therapeutic, allowing her to organize the chaotic events into a coherent narrative. 2 weeks after the attack, life had settled into a new normal. Zoe was more mobile, able to navigate short distances without crutches, though still with a pronounced limp. The wound on her calf, while still tender and vividly red, had closed completely and no longer required bandaging except during physical therapy sessions. Her sprained wrist had healed enough that she could use her camera again, though she had yet to venture beyond their small backyard garden for photography. School had officially ended for the summer, with Zoe completing her modified exams from home and achieving respectable grades despite the circumstances. Her friends, initially fascinated by her bear encounter, had gradually returned to treating her normally, which was exactly what she wanted. The story had gained modest local attention. A reporter from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had called requesting an interview for a feature on wildlife encounters in Pennsylvania, but Zoe had politely declined. The Warren Times-Observer had published a follow-up piece about the bear's successful relocation, mentioning Zoe by name this time but including no photographs or personal details. "You're sure you don't want to do any interviews?" Miguel asked, one evening as they sorted through college brochures at the kitchen table. "You could be famous. Local teen survives bear attack, gets full scholarship to Harvard." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Pretty sure that's not how scholarships work. Besides, I don't want to be known for getting attacked. I'd rather be known for my photography or something I actually accomplished." "Fair enough," Miguel conceded. "Speaking of which, have you thought more about using those bear photos in your portfolio?" Zoe had been wrestling with this question since recovering the images from her camera. The bear photograph was objectively excellent, perfectly composed, crisp, capturing a powerful moment in nature. Under normal circumstances, it would be a centerpiece of her portfolio, but the emotional associations made it complicated. "I'm still deciding," she said. "On one hand, it's probably the most significant photograph I've ever taken. On the other hand, I'm not sure I want to focus on that day when I'm trying to present myself to colleges." "How you could frame it as a learning experience," Miguel suggested. "Not just about wildlife photography, but about respecting nature, being prepared, all that stuff." "Maybe," Zoe said non-committally. "I've got time to decide." The conversation shifted to Miguel's impending departure for his summer internship in Philadelphia. He had postponed his start date by 2 weeks to help with Zoe's recovery, but now that she was more independent, he was preparing to leave. "You sure you'll be okay without me?" he asked, only half joking. "Who's going to scare away bears with coolers?" "I think I'll survive Pittsburgh without your protection," Zoe assured him. "Besides, I'm not planning any solo forest adventures anytime soon." The night before Miguel left, the family visited their favorite local restaurant to celebrate both his internship and Zoe's recovery progress. It was Zoe's first real outing since returning from the hospital, and though the short walk from the car to the restaurant left her leg aching, she was determined to enjoy the evening. The restaurant was busy with Friday night diners, and as the hostess led them to their table, Zoe was acutely aware of the curious glances directed at her halting gait. She had chosen to wear shorts despite the vivid scar on her calf, deciding that she'd rather deal with stares than be uncomfortable. In long pants during the June heat, they had just received their drinks when an elderly man from a neighboring table approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Excuse me," he said. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you the young lady who was attacked by a bear up in Warren County? I read about it in the paper." Zoe tensed, unprepared for this public recognition. "Yes," she acknowledged after a moment's hesitation. "That was me." The man nodded, eyes wide. "My grandson and I fish up in that area every summer. Been wondering if it's safe to go back, what with wild bears attacking folks." Daniel intervened smoothly. "The rangers have relocated that particular bear, sir, and incidents like that are extremely rare. Allegheny National Forest is still a very safe place to visit, if you take proper precautions." "If you say so." The man looked unconvinced. "Still quite a story you've got there, young lady. You're lucky to be alive." After he returned to his table, Zoe slouched in her chair, her appetite diminished. "That's exactly why I didn't want to do interviews," she muttered. "I don't want to be the poster child for bear safety." "People are naturally curious," Elena said gently, "and it is an unusual experience. The attention will fade with time." The rest of the dinner passed without further interruptions, though Zoe couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The incident highlighted her new reality, that the attack might follow her in unexpected ways, surfacing in casual conversations and chance encounters long after the physical wounds had healed. The following morning, they said goodbye to Miguel, who promised to call regularly and return for a weekend visit in July. His absence left the house quieter, with one less buffer between Zoe and her thoughts about the attack. To fill the void and distract herself from both her physical discomfort and lingering anxiety, Zoe dove into college research. She created spreadsheets comparing photography, programs, reviewed application requirements, and drafted potential essay topics. The familiar academic challenge provided a welcome focus, something she could control when so much else felt uncertain. 3 weeks after the attack, Zoe had her second follow-up appointment, where the remaining sutures were removed. The doctor was pleased with her progress, noting that the risk of infection had passed and the healing was proceeding normally. The scar, while still raised and red, would continue to fade over time, though it would always be visible. "Some patients choose scar revision surgery later," Dr. Murray told her, but I'd recommend waiting at least a year to see how it settles naturally before considering that option. Zoe studied the scar in the mirror that evening, a jagged, roughly circular mark about 3 inches in diameter on her right calf, with several smaller marks surrounding it where the bear's teeth had punctured less deeply. It was vivid against her olive skin, impossible to miss. Elena found her still examining it several minutes later. "It will fade," she said softly. "I know," Zoe replied. "I'm just getting used to it. It's part of me now. Does it bother you? What it looks like, I mean." Zoe considered this. "Not as much as I thought it would. It's a reminder of something important, how quickly everything can change, how small we are in the natural world." Elena squeezed her shoulder. "That's a very mature perspective, Mija." As June turned to July, Zoe's physical recovery continued steadily. Her sessions with Diane, the physical therapist, grew more challenging as they focused on rebuilding muscle strength and improving her gait. The exercises were often painful, leaving her leg aching and tired, but the results were tangible. Each week brought improved mobility and less reliance on supportive devices. The psychological recovery was less linear. Some days passed without Zoe thinking about the attack at all. On others, a sudden sound or movement would trigger a flash of memory so vivid it left her heart racing. Nights remained difficult, with dreams of being pursued or trapped recurring, several times a week. Elena, noticing these ongoing struggles, gently suggested that Zoe might benefit from talking to a professional. "There's nothing wrong with getting some help processing a traumatic experience," she assured her daughter. "It doesn't mean you're not healing." After some initial resistance, Zoe agreed to meet with a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. Dr. Lena Kaufman had a warm office in Shadyside, with comfortable chairs and nature photographs on the walls. During their first session, she listened attentively as Zoe recounted the attack, asking occasional questions, but mostly allowing her to tell the story at her own pace. "What you experienced was genuinely life-threatening," Dr. Kaufman acknowledged when Zoe had finished. "It's entirely normal to have ongoing emotional and psychological responses to that kind of trauma. The goal isn't to forget what happened, but to process it in a way that allows you to move forward without being controlled by the fear." Over the following weeks, Zoe continued meeting with Dr. Kaufman, gradually exploring not just the attack itself, but its ripple effects on her sense of safety, her relationship with nature, and her plans for the future. The sessions weren't always easy, but they provided a dedicated space for addressing feelings that Zoe had been trying to manage on her own. July brought warmer weather and increased activity as Zoe's mobility improved. She began accompanying her mother on short shopping trips and meeting friends for lunch, gradually expanding her comfort zone beyond the house. Each successful outing built her confidence, though she still found herself scanning her surroundings more vigilantly than before. Miguel returned for a weekend visit in mid-July, bringing stories of his internship and eager to see Zoe's progress. He was visibly relieved to find her walking with only a slight limp, her spirits much improved from when he had left. "You look good," he told her as they sat on the back porch, enjoying the summer evening. "More like yourself." "I feel more like myself," Zoe agreed. "Not completely, but getting there." "Have you been back to the woods yet?" Miguel asked. "Or is that still too much?" Zoe shook her head. "Not yet. Dr. Kaufman and I have talked about it. Exposure therapy, gradually. Reintroducing myself to similar environments. But I'm not ready for the actual forest." "What about parks, the gardens at Phipps?" "Parks are okay during the day with lots of people around," Zoe said. "I went to Shenley with Lisa last week. It was nice, but I still got jumpy when we walked." "Near the tree line?" Miguel nodded understandingly. "That makes sense. No rush, right? You've got time." The conversation drifted to college plans, with Miguel offering advice about applications and campus visits based on his recent experience. Zoe had narrowed her choices to 5 schools with strong visual arts programs, including Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh locally, as well as NYU, Boston University, and the Rhode Island School of Design. "We're planning campus visits in August," she told him, "starting with the local ones, then a road trip to the East Coast." "That's good timing," Miguel approved. "You'll be even stronger by then. Just pace yourself, and don't try to do too much in one day." Their parents joined them on the porch, bringing iced tea and cookies, and the family spent the evening together, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. The bear attack, while still a presence in their lives, had receded enough to allow these moments of normalcy. The following week, Zoe reached a significant milestone in her recovery, climbing the stairs to her bedroom on the second floor without assistance. Though the task left her leg muscles burning, the psychological victory of reclaiming her personal space was worth the discomfort. After weeks of sleeping in the makeshift arrangement in the den, she was eager to return to her own room with its familiar decorations and better privacy. The room was exactly as she had left it the morning of the picnic. Photographs taped to the walls, college brochures stacked on the desk, clothes draped over the chair. Yet it felt different somehow, as though it belonged to a slightly different version of herself. Zoe spent the afternoon reorganizing, clearing out old school papers and rearranging her photography books, trying to make the space feel current with who she was now. In the process, she came across her photography portfolio from junior year, a carefully curated collection of her best work that she had been planning to build upon for college applications. She flipped through the plastic sleeves, assessing each image with fresh eyes. They were good. Her teacher had praised her composition and use of light, but they suddenly seemed safe, predictable. Impulsively, Zoe reached for her camera and opened the digital folder containing the meadow photographs from the day of the attack. The wildflower images were beautiful, capturing the vibrant colors and delicate structures with technical precision. And then there was the bear photograph, powerful, unexpected, charged with meaning beyond its visual qualities. After some deliberation, Zoe transferred the images to her computer and began working with them in her editing software. She adjusted the contrast and saturation slightly, focusing on enhancing the natural beauty of the scenes without altering their fundamental truth. When she reached the bear photograph, she hesitated briefly before opening it. The image was even more striking on her larger screen. The bear's muscles were evident beneath its glossy coat, its posture both graceful and powerful as it moved through the meadow. Strange emotional intensity. This photograph represented a pivotal moment in her life, the last instant of innocence before everything changed. The printed image exceeded her expectations. On paper, the bear seemed even more immediate, more present. Zoe studied it for several minutes before sliding it into her portfolio, making the deliberate choice to include this complex, charged photograph among her work. That evening at dinner, she shared her decision with her parents. "I'm going to use the bear photo in my portfolio," she announced. "Not because it's about the attack, but because it's a good photograph, maybe even my best." Daniel and Elena exchanged glances. "Are you sure?" Elena asked carefully. "You don't need to define yourself by that experience for college admissions." "I'm not," Zoe assured her. "It's just one photograph among many, but it would feel dishonest to exclude it when it's technically strong and meaningful." "It's your portfolio," Daniel said supportively. "If you feel it represents your skills and vision as a photographer, then it belongs there." The decision marked a turning point in Zoe's relationship with the attack. Rather than something to avoid or overcome, it was becoming integrated into her narrative, not as a victim story, but as part of her journey as a photographer and a person. August arrived with a heat wave that made outdoor activities challenging. Zoe's physical therapy continued indoors, with Diane expressing satisfaction with her progress. "You're ahead of schedule," she told Zoe during their session. "The muscle strength is returning nicely, and your gait is almost normal now." The planned campus visits began with local tours of Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh. Though the walking left Zoe tired and sore, she managed the full tours without special accommodations, taking only occasional breaks to rest her leg. Between visits, Zoe worked on her application essays, struggling to find the right approach to the personal statement. The bear attack loomed as an obvious topic, a life-changing experience that had tested her resilience, but she was wary of exploiting the trauma or defining herself primarily through it. After several false starts, she sought advice from Dr. Kaufman during their session. "I feel like I should write about the attack because it's significant," she explained, "but I don't want it to seem like I'm using it for sympathy or drama." "That's a valid concern," Dr. Kaufman acknowledged. "What if you focused not on the attack itself, but on how it changed your perspective as a photographer, how it affected the way you see and capture the world?" The suggestion resonated with Zoe. That evening, she began a new draft of her essay, focusing on her evolving relationship with nature photography before and after the encounter with the bear. She wrote about the tension between capturing beauty and respecting wildness, about the responsibility of the observer, and about finding meaning in unexpected moments. The attack was present in the essay but not dominant, a catalyst rather than the focus. As the family prepared for their East Coast College tour, Ranger Collins called with a final update. "I wanted to let you know that we've been monitoring the relocated bear, and he's established a territory in the new area without any further human encounters. Our wildlife management team considers the case successfully resolved." "That's good to hear," Daniel replied. "Zoe will be glad to know the bear is doing well in its new location." When he shared the news with Zoe, she felt an unexpected surge of emotion. "I'm glad they didn't have to kill it," she said. "It was just being a bear doing what bears do." "You're remarkably understanding about an animal that could have killed you," Eleanor observed. Zoe shrugged. "I've had time to think about it. If I'd been more careful, more aware of my surroundings, I was in its territory, not the other way around." The East Coast College tour proved both exciting and exhausting. Over the course of a week, the family visited NYU, Boston University, and RISD, meeting with admissions officers and touring campus facilities. Zoe was particularly impressed with RISD's photography department and the urban energy of NYU, but found herself also drawn to the familiar comforts of the Pittsburgh schools. By the time they returned home, she had a clearer sense of her preferences, but wasn't ready to make final decisions about where to apply. The visits had energized her, providing concrete goals to work toward as she completed her senior year. The last weeks of summer passed quickly. Zoe's recovery continued, with her limp becoming less noticeable and her stamina improving. She began taking short solo photography excursions to local parks and gardens, gradually rebuilding her confidence in outdoor settings. Though she still startled at unexpected movements and avoided densely wooded areas, she was reclaiming her passion for nature photography, one careful step at a time. On the last weekend before school started, Daniel suggested a family dinner at their favorite local Italian restaurant to celebrate Zoe's recovery and the beginning of her senior year. The same restaurant, Zoe realized, where she had been recognized as the bear attack girl earlier in the summer. "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. "What if someone brings it up again?" "Then you'll handle it," Daniel said confidently. "You're not defined by what happened to you, Zoe. You never were." The restaurant was busy when they arrived, filled with families enjoying the last weekend of summer vacation. As they waited for their table, Zoe scanned the room, half expecting to be recognized again, but the other diners were absorbed in their own conversations, paying no particular attention to the Martinez family. Their meal was delicious and uneventful. Zoe found herself relaxing, joining in the conversation about Miguel's internship experiences and the upcoming school year. The bear attack, which had dominated their family dynamics for so long, receded to the background for a few precious hours. It was only as they were leaving, passing the hostess stand on their way out, that Zoe noticed a framed newspaper clipping on the wall. It was the article from the Warren Times-Observer describing the bear relocation program. Her name was mentioned briefly in the text, but there were no photographs of her, just a stock image of a black bear and a map of Allegheny National Forest. "They put up the article," she commented to her parents, nodding toward the framed piece. Eleanor tensed slightly. "Does that bother you?" Zoe considered the question, studying the modest newspaper clipping with her small mention. "No," she decided. "It's just a story to most people, something that happened to someone else. They don't know what it felt like, what it means to me." As they walked to the car, Zoe found herself thinking about the relocated bear, now establishing a new life in a different part of the forest. She wondered if it remembered their brief, violent encounter as vividly as she did, or if it had simply moved on, following its instincts in a new territory. The bear would never know how profoundly it had altered the course of her life, the physical pain, the nights of troubled sleep, the new wariness in wild places. But it had also given her something unexpected, a deeper understanding of her place in the natural world, a more nuanced perspective on her photography, and a tangible reminder of her own resilience. "Ready for senior year?" Daniel asked as they drove home, the lights of Pittsburgh glittering around them. Zoe glanced down at her leg, where the scar was hidden beneath her jeans, but always present. It would be with her when she walked the halls of Oakland Catholic, when she visited college campuses, when she eventually left home for university and beyond. Not just a mark of violence, but a testament to survival. "I'm ready," she said, and found that she meant it. The next morning, as Zoe prepared for the first day of senior year, she took extra care with her appearance. She chose a sundress that conveyed confidence, applied minimal makeup, and arranged her dark hair in loose waves around her shoulders. The girl in the mirror looked older somehow, more self-possessed than the junior who had eagerly set out with her camera just 3 months ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Pick you up in 15. Ready for the last first day?" Zoe smiled and typed back a quick affirmative, then gathered her backpack and camera. The latter was a deliberate choice, a statement that photography remained central to her identity, bear attack or no bear attack. Downstairs, Eleanor had prepared a special breakfast of chilaquiles, Zoe's favorite. "For strength on your first day," she explained, setting the plate on the table. "Thanks, Mum," Zoe said, genuinely appreciative of the gesture. As they ate, they discussed the day ahead, Zoe's schedule, her teachers, the friends she was looking forward to seeing again. "Are you worried about questions?" Daniel asked carefully. "About what happened?" Zoe considered this. "Not really. Most people already know the basics from social media, and my close friends have heard the whole story. I'm sure there will be some questions, but I'm okay with that." Her confidence wasn't just bravado. Over the summer, with Dr. Kaufman's help, Zoe had developed strategies for discussing the attack without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. She had practiced brief, matter-of-fact responses that acknowledged what happened without inviting excessive probing. When Lisa's car honked from the driveway, Zoe hugged her parents goodbye and headed out, her gait almost normal now, with just a slight hesitation when she descended the front steps. "Look at you," Lisa greeted her, eyeing the sundress appreciatively. "Senior year, Zoe is not messing around." Zoe laughed as she slid into the passenger seat, just trying to make a good impression on the first day. As they drove toward Oakland Catholic, Lisa filled her in on the summer gossip she had missed. Who was dating whom? Which teachers had left or joined the school? The latest drama in their extended friend group. The familiar chatter was comforting, grounding Zoe in the ordinary world of teenage concerns. The school parking lot was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Students congregated in groups, comparing schedules and sharing summer stories. Zoe felt a momentary apprehension as she stepped out of the car, aware of curious glances directed her way. "Just breathe," Lisa murmured, falling into step beside her. "You've got this." The first direct question came from Tyler Chen, Lisa's cousin and a fellow senior, as they gathered in the hallway before homeroom. "Zoe, heard you had a close encounter with wildlife this summer. How'd that happen?" Zoe gave him the abbreviated version she had practiced. "I was taking pictures in Allegheny National Forest and surprised a black bear. Got bit on the leg before my brother scared it off. Still healing, but doing much better now." "That's wild," Tyler said, clearly impressed. "Can I see the scar?" "Not really appropriate for school," Lisa interjected before Zoe could respond. Tyler looked abashed. "Right, sorry. That was weird to ask." "It's okay," Zoe assured him. "Maybe another time." Throughout the morning, similar exchanges occurred as Zoe reconnected with classmates and teachers. Most expressed concern and asked how she was doing, but didn't press for graphic details. Her photography teacher, Ms. Rivera, pulled her aside after class to welcome her back and inquire sensitively about how the experience might influence her work. "I'd like to see those images, if you're comfortable sharing them," Ms. Rivera said, "but only when you're ready." "I've actually included one in my portfolio for college applications," Zoe told her. "I can bring it in tomorrow if you'd like to see it." "I'd be honored," Ms. Rivera replied warmly. By lunchtime, Zoe had settled into the rhythm of the school day, the initial awkwardness fading as classes and conversations focused on the year ahead rather than the summer past. In the cafeteria, she joined her usual group of friends, most of whom had already heard her story over the summer. "So what's happening with college apps?" asked Jake, a fellow photography enthusiast. "Still thinking NYU?" "It's on my list," Zoe confirmed, grateful for the shift to future plans. "Along with Carnegie Mellon, Pitt, Boston University, and RISD. We did campus visits last month." "RISD's photography program is amazing," Jake said enviously. "What's your portfolio looking like?" Zoe described her current collection, including the meadow photographs and, briefly, the bear image. Her friends listened with interest, asking thoughtful questions about her artistic choices rather than focusing on the trauma behind them. The day continued smoothly, with the initial curiosity about Zoe's summer experience gradually giving way to the more pressing concerns of senior year: college applications, SAT scores, final extracurricular achievements. By the final bell, Zoe felt cautiously optimistic about the year ahead. Lisa drove her home, chatting about plans for the weekend and potential senior year bucket list activities. "We should definitely do the autumn hike in Frick Park," she was saying as they pulled into Zoe's driveway. "The foliage will be amazing for photography." Zoe tensed slightly at the mention of hiking, a reaction she couldn't entirely suppress despite her progress. "Maybe," she said non-committally. "Let's see how the next few weeks go." Lisa caught the hesitation and backtracked. "Or we could just do the sculpture garden at the museum. Whatever works for you." "I'll think about Frick Park," Zoe said, not wanting her fear to dictate their plans. "Just not alone, okay? Group hike only." "Deal," Lisa agreed easily. Safety in numbers. That evening at dinner, Zoe shared the events of her first day with her parents, emphasizing the positive interactions and the way most people had respected her boundaries regarding the attack. "It wasn't as big a deal as I thought it might be," she concluded. "More people wanted to talk about college plans than bear attacks." "That's good," Eleanor said, visibly relieved. "Though I'm not surprised. It's been a few months, and teenagers have short attention spans for anything that isn't directly about them." "True," Zoe laughed. "Ashley's summer nose job is definitely getting more attention than my bear encounter at this point." The conversation shifted to Miguel, who had called earlier with updates from his internship, and then to weekend plans. The normalcy of the discussion felt like another step forward, another indication that life was continuing its forward momentum despite the interruption of the attack. Later, as Zoe prepared for bed, she found herself drawn to the window that overlooked their backyard. The night was clear, with a waxing moon illuminating the familiar landscape of suburban Pittsburgh, so different from the wild forest where she had encountered the bear, yet connected to it through invisible threads of ecology and human impact. She thought about the meadow, wondering if another teen might be photographing wildflowers there now, unaware of what had happened in that beautiful space. She thought about the bear, now roaming a different territory, perhaps foraging for late summer berries under the same moon. The attack had changed her, leaving visible and invisible marks that she would carry forward. But standing at her window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood where she had grown up, Zoe recognized that those changes weren't entirely negative. She was more cautious now, yes, but also more aware of her surroundings, more appreciative of safety, more conscious of the wild currents that ran beneath the surface of ordinary life. The bear had walked away from their encounter and continued living according to its nature. Now Zoe was doing the same, carrying her experience forward as she navigated her senior year, college applications, and whatever came after. The attack would always be part of her story, but it wouldn't be the whole story. That was still unfolding, day by day, choice by choice. Zoe closed her curtains and turned away from the window, ready to rest before the second day of senior year. Tomorrow, she would bring her portfolio to Ms. Rivera, bear photograph included. Tomorrow, she would take another step forward, another moment of living with but not defined by what had happened in a wildflower meadow on a sunny May afternoon. The bear would continue its life in the forest, and Zoe would continue hers. Here, their paths briefly, violently intersected, but now diverged again into separate futures. And that, Zoe thought as she drifted toward sleep, was exactly as it should be.